This is the Comics Alternative, episode 279, a look at the May Previews catalog. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative. I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
That's right. And it is the beginning of May, which means that it's time for us to look at the current month's previews catalog. But before we get into a discussion of those solicitations, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative is brought to you by the good folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off of the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price. Sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that.
That's right. One of the ways that you can take advantage of great discounts is to check out the bundles that they have at DCBS. Man, you got Marvel bundles with Marvel's Fresh Start and Marvel's Legacy. You got DC bundles galore with the New Age of Heroes and a Young Animal and DC Kids bundles. You got Valiant bundles. You got all kinds of bundles at most of them at 50% off. So you're going to be able to get great savings on a big pile of comics that you know you want. So check those out if you when you go to DCBS, as well as checking out all the stuff that we talk about today in our previews episode.
That's right. You can rest assured that every single thing that Paul and I mention in the May Previews catalog is going to be at impressive discounts at DCB Service. So definitely check them out. Go to dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
Yeah, if you've never done that, please do that. That would help us out a lot.
Yes, it would. Well, Paul, before we get started with the preview show, and who knows, this could be another long episode, as our previews episodes tend to be, I have some listener mail to share with our listeners.
Mail time. Ooh, the mail's here. That means we get to see our old friend, Mailbox.
So this is from someone that we've actually communicated with before. His name is Eris Katsas, and he responded over the past week via Facebook about episode number 277. Now, this is the one where we discussed Von Spatz. He says, I really enjoyed the discussion about Von Spatz. For me, it was a weird book that I enjoyed. It left me with a strong feeling that I have read something really interesting, but it was hard for me to recall exactly what had happened inside its pages. I had the pleasure of meeting and discussing with Anna Hayfish a week ago. She's extremely nice, friendly, and interesting person, and talked about this book with her. After that, I listened to your discussion, and now I'm looking forward to rereading it and appreciating it even more.
Oh, Aris, thank you so much for corresponding with us and letting us know. And great to hear that Anna Hayfish is as interesting and seems like as nice a person as her work comes across. But we love getting that kind of correspondence. And let us know your thoughts about the stuff that we read and review. That kind of interaction is precious to us.
It is. And I'm curious where Eris met Hayfish.
Yeah, maybe a convention or appearance or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, keep those correspondences coming.
We love hearing from you.
Okay, Paul, let's jump into this month's previews catalog. And it's been a while since you and I did a preview show together. I can't remember the last time. I guess it was early this year. Maybe January, February. Maybe?
Could be, maybe even farther back. But
Wow.
it's always fun to look ahead into the comics crystal ball with you, Derek. I feel like I always learn a lot talking to you, so it's kind of an education, and it really makes sure that I wind up catching everything that I want to pre-order, just to make sure that no more money goes into my savings account. That we these conversations ensure that my comic spending is robust.
Yeah. I feel the same in terms of talking about previews with you. But there have been some significant changes to previews since you and I last did a show. And in fact, even since last month's show that I did with Gene, the April preview show. Now, last month was the first month that we had both Dynamite and Boom in the premium section toward the beginning of the catalog. But now this is the first month that the DC solicits are in its own catalog.
Yeah, that's a big change. And, we've already had Marvel as a separate catalog. And then the Image Plus, Image stays in the catalog still, but Image Plus as a kind of addition to previews has been there. And there's also little other bits and pieces of previews. It's becoming a big old multi-volume thing to take this home, which, is part of the reason why this month, for the first time, I've switched to looking at previews at the Previews app. And so if folks go to their, smartphone or tablet, Google Store or iOS, Apple Store, App Store, you can actually find a Previews app. And so I'm going to be scrolling through this app today as we talk. It'll be an interesting experience, because there may be awkward pauses while I'm flipping pages, but, I have a basement full of previews catalogs that my wife can't wait for me to find a home for. So this hopefully reduces some of that clutter, even as the catalog shifts and expands.
What, you kept your old catalogs?
Yeah, I'm the dummy who thought one of these days maybe I'd want to go back and look at, what was being solicited in May 2011. I don't know.
Yeah, my hard copies I recycle whenever I get them, which I don't really do anymore. Although today I will be looking from a hard copy. Now, I didn't know about this app. So you can, I guess people can go to the iTunes store or go to the Android. What's the Android shop called?
I think it's called the Google Play Store. Yeah.
Google Play Store. Okay. So they can get the app there. Okay. Is it the complete catalog? It's not truncated in any way?
No, it's the whole catalog, and and the DC and Marvel and so on are thrown in there. The thing that I think it has going for it in the future is that everything that's in the catalog is linked. It's tappable. So you can actually see, as I'm flipping pages now, certain zones of the page kind of light up, and that's a way to let you know, oh, this is a title I'm interested in. Let me tap it, and it will take me to a link that will give me more information, which sounds really promising. But as of right now, every time I tap on one of those links, there's no page there. There's nothing behind it yet. But I think the idea is that eventually, it'll expand beyond the limits of the page and really be able to give us more information. And, best of all, possibly more preview pages, because I think that's my favorite thing about this catalog. And often I'm, dismayed when I want to see some interiors from a book, and that's not, that's not offered. So, hopefully it'll be a cool expandability. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting to know. And that in addition to some of these changes to the previews catalog that we've already mentioned, and, others that actually were instituted, beginning last month, is that the manga section, as we will discuss, is a separate part that's toward the back of the catalog.
Right.
And then another thing that they've done, and I feel mixed about this. This is one of those things I don't necessarily like about the changes, is that they've taken the book section and mixed it within the comic section.
That's right. There's a little tag under a lot of books that say prose book, green label that lets you know it's a prose book. So yeah, I think there's good and bad to that. But it'll be interesting as we go through the catalog, they will pop up and we can see kind of the effect of that integration.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start. And we're going to begin. Now, this is another thing that's interesting about this month's catalog with the image section. Now, Paul, it was my assumption that, as they've done in the past, that previews would organize the publishers alphabetically. And so we have toward the beginning the premier publishers, which had been alphabetically represented. And then the back half of the catalog, or the green section, if you want to call it that, with the smaller publishers, and those are organized in an alphabetized way. Now, I think most of the catalog is alphabetized, but we begin with Image before Dark Horse, which doesn't make sense to me.
Somewhere Mike Richardson has his hands on his hip, shaking his head going, hey, what happened? We used to be right in front. But I do tend to go to Image often first, and so for me, there's a convenience factor, but definitely it's about, preeminence in terms of sales or something like that. Now that, DC and Marvel are out of this main catalog proper. So, it's interesting, but it was kind of fun to have Dark Horse at the top of things, actually, as a kind of routine.
Yeah. And I guess the organized side of me doesn't like this because, if you're going to alphabetize, then go all the way, right. Don't alphabetize part of it and then the other part don't. And I agree with you in that maybe one of the reasons why they're featuring Image first is that now that both DC and Marvel are out of the catalog, Image is the most prominent, at least in terms of sales publisher. However, that's not the way that they would organize things, even when DC, let's say, was in the catalog.
That's right.
Because it was still, alphabetized. So why do this? And I'm wondering if maybe on a regular basis, Diamond is going to rotate what premier publishers are first. I don't know, because if they were alphabetizing this, then Boom would come first. Then we would get Dark Horse.
That's right.
Then a little minor DC section, and then Dynamite, IDW, Image.
Huh. So, it strikes me actually, since so we get Image and then we get Dark Horse, but then we jump to IDW before Dynamite and Boom. There's that little DC section. They do they Marvel do, which, gotcha. If you want to consider that a small insertion of DC. But you're right, the Dark Horse and then IDW and then Dynamite and Boom. Right. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so starting with Image, and, we say this almost every month, that Image just has a whole slew of number ones for new series and miniseries, and this month is no exception. So there are quite a number of number one issues that I'm interested in. I begin at the very beginning on page 42.
Yeah, that's where I start too.
So this is Farmhand number one, and this is written and drawn by Rob Guillory, who, among other things, was the artist of
Chew.
Chew, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
For some reason I blanked there, but yeah, he the artist of Chew. So he has a very distinctive style. I mean, you can tell, even if you didn't see the name Guillory on this page, you could look at the cover of Farmhand number one,
right,
and see, yeah, this is Rob Guillory.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting because, Guillory's a great talent. I like the sort of wit in his art style. There's a great sense of humor, and it fit perfectly for Chew. But I love long form stories like Chew, and so it was cool that Guillory was committed to that entire run. But once that's over, it's kind of exciting to see. He's a free agent. He's a available piece on the chessboard or whatever, and now he's writing and drawing this book, which is about a farmer who is growing organs. So it's got that sort of body humor horror that Guillory draws so well. So I'm interested in this too.
Yeah. So in certain ways, the content is somewhat reminiscent of what we got with Chew.
Right. Yep.
In a way.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to this one. And the way they describe it is if you enjoy the dark humor of Chew and the science fiction storytelling of Soylent Green, you'll love Farmhand.
Soylent Green is people.
Soylent Green is people. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, from there, facing page, we get Unnatural number 1 of 12. Is that where you're going next?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. A story and art by Mirka Andolfo, who's an Italian creator who I've been seeing around with Wonder Woman and some different DC work. You and I actually talked about Andolfo because he was the artist on the Milk Wars crossover Wonder Woman issue.
Yes.
Yeah. And Unnatural is a sort of anthropomorphic story of a pig who a pig girl who is in a very repressive society, and she's trying to really try to break out on her own. But, it's, Andolfo has a really kind of, I'd call it a luscious art style. It's very, very, I think that she's very fleshy, if I can call it that.
Yes.
Just in terms of the feeling of the art and just kind of what it gives off, what it radiates. So, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think there'll be some, alternative kind of takes on bodies and control over bodies and things like that in this story with, as it says in the text here, a hint of sensuality. So
yeah, well, I want to look at the solicit because I think it's rather telling. It says Leslie is a simple pig girl. Okay, so that caught my attention from the beginning. Mm-hmm. She loves sushi, she's stuck with a job she hates, and she lives under a brutal totalitarian government. I wonder if Trump is the president. One that punishes transgressors for anything deemed unnatural. Mm-hmm. Leslie dreams of something different for herself, but those dreams are becoming different. And then, as you mentioned, the way that it's described in a follow-up, it says, colorful but terrible world full of anthropomorphic creatures, but light on personal freedoms by way of a breathtaking plot that travels between thriller, fantasy, and a hint of sensuality. And it's the sensuality part that actually caught my attention visually when I looked at this page for the first time, because as you mentioned, there is, I guess this is Leslie on the cover. Mm-hmm. She is, how do I put this? I guess rather fleshy, and full. And she's dressed in such a way that it is very sensual. It's very alluring. And there is a creature of some sort behind her that is reaching around, and his hand is actually over her crotch area. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I think, a very sexual cover without being over the top. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But then also we get a small image of cover B, which is even more sexual in nature. So I'm wondering what to expect from this series. Now, it says it's a hit Italian series. I have not heard of this. Had you?
No, I only heard about it, I think, in an Image Plus issue that was previewing it. And the sense that I get that the cover B that you see, I feel like that's a take on the controversial Milo Manara covers. And there's a certain, I think recapturing ownership of the portrayal of bodies that's going on here with Andolfo. I mean, it's certainly a super sexual image, but I think it's even also a bit of a satirizing of that kind of hypersexualization. So yeah, I'll see. I'm not that sexy a guy. I mean, not just myself, but even in my reading tastes. But I'm always up for something that either satirizes or pushes us to think about the ways that we portray and consume, sexualized images. So I feel like maybe there's some of that in this, particularly in the way that it's an anthropomorphized pig and all that means. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think your expectations are a little different from mine because knowing that this was a hit Italian series, I mean, it's not as if I'm suggesting that all European comics have a much more sensual tone than, let's say, U.S. produced comics. Mm-hmm. It's just that there are many titles that we're familiar with, let's say from Humanoids, for example, that do have that sensualized sense to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering if the representation of bodies, male and especially female, are going to be satirized, or at least the representation is going to be satirized in the ways that you're expecting it to be. And who knows? I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Satirized probably isn't the right word. I guess it's just that
interrogated.
Maybe not even interrogated. I think there's Andolfo's work definitely embraces, a sort of like portrayal of the voluptuous body, but I think it's a matter of ownership and objectification or not. Which is I think interesting. I don't know. We'll see. But I do think Unnatural will be a title that a lot of people will be interested in seeing. Yeah,
and we could possibly talk about it in a future episode.
Yeah. Where do you go next?
Turn the page 45.
I'm there too.
Yeah, and this is New Lieutenants of Metal, number 1 of 4. This is written by Joe Casey with art by Ulysses Farinas. And I like both Casey's and Farinas' work, especially Farinas' art. His art always draws me in.
Yeah, likewise, I feel the same. Yeah. And this story, which is I think a chance to really play up some of the fun elements of that art. I mean, it's entitled New Lieutenants of Metal, and you see all kinds of awesome creatures and armor and stuff like that. Animals wearing armor, that kind of thing, which does cool things with Farinas' art. So I'm looking forward to this too. Joe Casey can be hit or miss for me, but lately more hits than misses. And Farinas' Claudia and Rex recently was a really fun romp for me, and I liked that. So I'm up for this too.
Now one of the things that you can see on this page is, and I don't remember Image doing this in the past, maybe it did and I just didn't pay attention, is they're giving the target audience. So you can see toward the bottom of the page, it says audience, young adult, teen.
Right. Yeah.
And in this kind of art, because this is a different kind of Farinas art that I'm used to. I mean, I can tell it's Farinas, but it does have a more, I don't know if this is a good way of putting it, but more of a kind of a cartoony look to it, a more fun look, not as detailed, not as heavy, I guess.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, maybe this is something that you and Gwen can discuss on a future Young Reader show.
Yeah, that might be really fun. Yeah, the offered again thing is interesting too, because under that little audience caption, there's what else is offered, and the list here makes sense because I think that's Joe Casey work, right? But in some of the previous ones, like Unnatural, it says offered again Sunstone, which different creators obviously, but
right, but that was kind of a sensual, sexual kind of narrative. So
exactly. So offered again, I think winds up putting the work in a certain genre, maybe, or certain categories, so, yeah.
And we can see that if we turn the page. I don't know if you want to say anything else about New Lieutenants of Metal.
No, let's go.
But yeah, if you turn the page on both 46 and 47, I mean, these are two other number 1 issues that I'm interested in.
Yep.
Now, on 46, we have The New World, number 1 of 5, and this is yet another title from Alice Cott. And the art is by Tradmore and Heather Moore.
Yeah.
How much can Alice Cott do?
He is a very smart guy. So, but all of his works kind of spin out into these vast worlds. He's got a lot of thoughts, it seems like. But this will be interesting. And Tradmore, for fans who, is it Luther Strange that Moore did previous work on in Image?
I'm not sure. Was it?
Yeah, definitely. He was around some Ghost Rider work, and so he's got a cool style that I enjoy. So it'll be cool. I think Cott has this way of writing to the sensibilities of the artists that he works with, and that should be cool. This is a U.S. after the Second World War, so it's a future, and and it's a sort of sci-fi action romance is what it calls it. So
yeah, it says the United States of America after the Second Civil War. Two lovers meet. One, a straight-edge vegan hacker anarchist boy with a penchant for messing with the state. The other, a chaotic, hedonistic cop with a reality TV show and a license to kill. This really shouldn't happen, and yet somehow it does. And soon, the entire state of New California is after them.
That's the most Alice Cottish premise I've ever heard. But that's a good thing. I like that.
Alice Cotty.
Yes, it's Alice Cottish. And on the other side, Outpost Zero looks pretty good. We have Sean Kelly McKeever back again, and an artist I hadn't heard of, Alexander Tefenki is my attempt at that name.
Yeah,
as well as Jean-Francois Beaulieu, who remind me. Do you know? Is that a colorist? I believe. I've seen that name around.
I would guess, but they don't indicate that.
That's right. But the cover looks great. It looks interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is one of those titles that I was referring to when I said something about the offered again section, because you see underneath, and again, this is also for audience, young adult and teen.
Sure.
But under offered again, it says The Fuse, volumes 1 through 3. So again, it kind of does what you had suggested earlier, kind of places it within a particular genre.
That's right. Yeah, I missed the fuse. So actually, in this case, that really worked on me. I mean, I think the cover art was the first thing that drew me. McKeever was the second, but seeing that they're placing it in that general zone looks like it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. It says, Welcome to the Outpost. Welcome to Outpost Zero, the smallest town in the universe. The people there work the land, go to the fights every Friday night, and tuck their children into bed. But the Outpost is no place for dreams or aspirations. To survive is ambitious enough. As Allie and her friends graduate to adulthood on a frozen world never meant to support human life, something stirs, something sees. ...
Yep, that'll be interesting. You know, on a sort of somewhat related note, I noticed that Monstrous, which is, of course, an Image series, was up for an Eisner among the nominees.
Yeah.
And it was in 2 different categories, one of which was the teens. Teen book section. And so it makes me think, I've always wondered about, Image has always done young readers or teen readers targeted books. And I just wonder if that's something where they're doing more experiments or putting more of a point of emphasis, to kind of expand their reach.
Well, if they're smart, they're doing that because that's where a large section of the comics buying audience is.
That's right. Yeah. And stuff like this looks pretty good. I'm definitely in for trying it out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where do you go after that?
I'm not until 54. Do you have anything before?
Me too.
Okay. We're thinking the same thing. Very stable geniuses think alike.
Yes.
So I'll go at this one. This is Memoirs of a Very Stable Genius. It's a compilation of short stories and gags from Shannon Wheeler, who is known for God Has Disappointed You and Too Much Coffee Man, and in fact a Berkeley local of mine around here. Never had the pleasure in person, but have loved and enjoyed his work. And
he's
everybody
in Berkeley?
knows. Yeah, I believe so.
I thought he was in Seattle or Portland, one of the two.
I could be totally wrong about that. Maybe he is, and he visits Berkeley now and then. I know that my local comic shop in Berkeley, The Escapist, has had him visit a number of times. So maybe that was just a visit. But yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like I read somewhere that he maybe for a time was in Berkeley. But we do have a way of attracting interesting folks,
Well, you're Berkeley after all, so.
But this is, the title obviously alludes to the Trump self-comment, self-notation of a very stable genius. So there's a very simple and very very Shannon Wheeler kind of image where somebody is writing knowledge is power on the board, but it has a kick me sign on his back.
Yeah, it's on the cover.
That's the cover. So it's a sense of the tone. So yeah, I like Shannon Wheeler's sense of humor. I'm going to be here for this. Yeah,
I do as well. And I can't remember how long ago it was, 3, maybe 4 years ago. I think it was Gene, and I interviewed Shannon for the podcast. This may have been the time that God Is Disappointed in You came out, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. In fact, I think I remember that. I think I remember hearing that episode.
Yeah, he was fun to talk with. And, I've loved Too Much Coffee Man for years, so it was a joy to get him on the show.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Now, I don't have anything else in Image. I mean, there are other things in Image that I'm interested in, but I think nothing that I wanted to mention on the show. What about you?
Same. On facing the page of Memoirs of a Very Stable Genius is the Sleepless series that's written by Sarah Vaughan and drawn by Leila Del Duca. And folks haven't been looking at that. That's being collected. So that's a great one to follow. I'm also in for Paradiso, which starts a new arc. We could talk forever about issues 17 of many of these, of our favorite series. But,
I mentioned that this month, as in most months, there are quite a number of number 1 issues of new series. There are also this month quite a number of trade collections of their ongoing series.
Yeah, that's right. As always, but some good moments in the trade collection. So
I think more trades than usual.
Could be.
I haven't counted, but
I mean, I'm hopeful that's a sign of a upward trend for Image. Yeah.
So if neither of us have anything else to mention in Image, then we move over to Dark Horse. And what do you have, or where do you begin in Dark Horse?
Well, I begin where they do, which is the Quantum Age, from the world of Black Hammer. So this is the next spinning off series from the Black Hammer universe of Jeff Lemire and friends. And in this case, art is by Wilfredo Torres. And, this is a sort of a, it's of course the Black Hammer universe, but it's 1,000 years in the future and heroes that have been inspired by the Black Hammer heroes that we've gotten to know from the main Black Hammer series. And I'm excited about this because it's Black Hammer and Jeff Lemire is awesome. And this entire, set of series have been really, really fun. But also I'm a big fan of Wilfredo Torres' art. He's got that very clean style that, looks like it's really good. So, these preview pages, looks like an armadillo character. And then one of these characters where they have a big brain that's in a bottle. I'm always a sucker for that. So I'm kind of interested in the Quantum Age. I've been reading all of these. I don't know if you've been able to keep up with the rapidly expanding Black Hammer universe, but they've been good.
I haven't. I mean, I love Black Hammer, but after the first volume of the regular series, I stopped reading it, not because I didn't like it, but I guess for a couple of reasons. One, there are just a lot of things that are competing for my attention. So I slowly quit reading Black Hammer and started to read other things. And then another reason is, rightly or wrongly, whether I should do this or not, trade waiting. I thought, okay, so why don't I wait until they really start collecting this stuff? And not just in paperback trades, because this is such a hit, the Black Hammer universe, that I'm sure, or at least I hope, that Dark Horse is going to come out with kind of a deluxe hardbound edition. And so I'm kind of betting on those. And so I haven't been getting the trades, but I'm waiting for the deluxe editions if they actually come out, which I'm sure they would, because some of their more successful series, that's what they've done, right? With, for instance, The Massive, definitely Hellboy.
Yep.
Goon.
Yeah, this is a library edition candidate for sure.
Yeah.
But
I'm interested in this new series, The Quantum Age. Although my question for Black Hammer is similar to my question about Alice Cott. How much more can Jeff Lemire do with Black Hammer? I mean, of course, he's writing this and not illustrating, but there's just so many tangents and spin-offs from the Black Hammer original series I mean, wow, it's almost too much to keep up with at times.
Yeah, it is. And, I think in many ways, Lemire reads better in collected form anyway. There's a lot of emotional resonance to these very quiet beats that if you just come in month by month, sometimes it can be hard for them to resonate as much as, they could. But when you read it all together, there's a lot of force. There's a lot of power in it. But of course, if you want to support these things, and make sure they exist, then you have to get them monthly and stuff like that. But, no, Dr. Starr was awesome. The, Sherlock Frankenstein was really cool. So, I'm aboard for this universe. And how does Jeff Lemire do it? Indeed. It is a good question. But, one thing is that each of those previous series have been, sometimes, allusions to multiple series. Dr. Starr was very clearly a Starman, tribute. And I wonder if what the Quantum Age may be saluting, it's, maybe it's a Legion of Superheroes, take on or whatever. But it's definitely the future sci-fi mixed with the superhero fare that Lemire is taking on here. So, yeah.
Well, if we turn the page, that's where I go next.
Me too.
On 96. And this is notable for a couple of reasons. I think for me, first and foremost, is this is the latest in Berger books. And this caught me by surprise because, you and I interviewed Karen Berger a few months ago, and she was talking about not only the series that were just starting or about to start, but also she mentioned a couple of upcoming series. And I can't remember the title of the one that she had mentioned that I expected to see out by now. But she didn't mention this one at all. This is She Could Fly, #1. This is written by Christopher Cantwell with art by Martin Morazzo. So yeah, this caught me by surprise.
Yeah. Are you thinking of the Innocenti one with David Aja?
Yes, it's that one.
I'm trying to remember the title of that.
Yeah,
too,
I can't remember.
Yeah, that looks really good, although maybe delayed.
Yeah, apparently so.
Possible, right?
Yeah. And this one has an interesting premise. It says, in Chicago, an unknown woman appears flying at speeds of 120 miles per hour and at heights reaching 2,000 feet. Then she suddenly dies in a fiery explosion midair. No one knows who she was, how she flew, or why. Luna, a disturbed 15-year-old girl, becomes obsessed with learning everything about her while rumors and conspiracy theories roll. Will cracking the secrets of the flying woman's inner life lead to the liberation from her own troubled mind? And that's a great premise. And the art, Marazzo's art, both, we have the cover, and then we have an inside sample page, I think is quite compelling.
Yeah. That's what most drew my eye, besides the Burger Books imprint, is that Marazzo was an artist on Nighthawk. And Nighthawk initially was drawn by Ramon Villalobos, who is another sort of, Northern California native, whose art is so cool. And then Marazzo came along with some of the fill-in issues on Nighthawk. And I also loved that art. They both sort of have a Frank Quitely 2.0 style that looks, you kind of see that a little bit in some of these pages.
Yeah.
This kind of fine stippling that seems European, influenced, and a great sense of balance and proportion. And, you can see that in the cover too. So this looks interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if we turn the page, we have two other instances of Burger Books. On page 99, we have the first, and this is hardbound, collection of Hungry Ghosts, which I think was their very first title, the first title of Burger Books. Yep. So it's good to see that is being collected. But then on the previous page on 98 is something that actually Karen did mention to us when we interviewed her, and that is the 10th anniversary expanded edition of Jonathan Ames and Dean Haspiel's The Alcoholic.
Yeah. Looking forward to this. Although talking about hungry, alcohol, and burger makes me realize I haven't had lunch. But The Alcoholic is the first encounter I had with Dean Haspiel, who is the artist. Jonathan Ames, of course, is the writer. He's written for TV and stuff like that. But I remember reading that 10 years ago when it came out, and honestly, I don't remember the story much, except that it was very much in the vein of really kind of interesting self-confessional, autobiography type comics. But I remember that art jumping out to me quite a lot. And here it is. Here we get a new edition, which would be good. Yeah.
I read The Alcoholic when it first came out, I guess about 10 years ago now. It doesn't seem that long.
Right.
And I really enjoyed it. But, like you, I've forgotten a lot about it. So I'll have to go back and look at that again. But I wonder what's expanded about this 10th anniversary edition.
Yeah, I'm looking for...
It says a new prose piece by Jonathan Ames expanding on the story material as well as behind the scenes artist section. So maybe that's what's expanded about it.
Yeah, could be. No, I'm excited to see this back. Yeah.
Where do you go after that?
I just have to briefly mention that Disney Pixar, Dark Horse on page 100 has a Disney Pixar, The Incredibles 2, #1. I'm just super excited about The Incredibles coming back. And so this is, I think, a story that it takes place within the upcoming movie and beyond. So that's just kind of some childhood fun type of stuff. The Incredibles is great. So that'll be fun.
It was a really good movie. Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't it? And the teams here. I mean, Christos Gage and Landry Walker, Gurihiru, who appears that sort of 2-artist team, who's going to appear a number of times in this catalog for me, as well as J-Bone and others. So I think they're going to do different pieces, but all that is good creative teams on a solid property. So I'm excited. Yeah. How about you? Where are you next?
I go next to page 108.
Awesome.
I don't know if you have anything before that. Yeah, this is really fascinating. This is Criminy, Volume 1, written and drawn by Roger Langridge.
Yeah.
I love Langridge's work. Yes. I like his... I don't really read, but visually what I've seen of his titles intentionally for younger audiences looks really good, but also his more mature, if you want to call it that, comics, even though they still look cartoony, It definitely has, obviously, the language stamp to it. This is a title that I would guess maybe you would call all age. From the description, it seems that way. It says, from the Eisner and Harvey Award-winning creator of Snarked, which is a younger title for younger readers, and writer of the acclaimed comic series Dave, because I guess, this is also written by Ryan Ferrier. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And I really enjoyed the first Dave series. I didn't read the second, but I thought that it was really clever, great sense of humor. And so it just strikes me that Ferrier would work really well with language here. It says, Dagum Criminy's peaceful life is suddenly interrupted as pirates invade his island, casting Criminy's family out as refugees into the wild unknown in search of a new home. Soon the Criminys find themselves hopping from one strange locale to another, each with their own bizarre environment, people, and challenges, putting Dagum and family in constant peril as the search for a new peaceful place to call home.
Yeah, I'm excited about this too. I also am a big fan of Langridge. For me, Langridge's Thor was the definitive Thor, but this has some great, I think probably, tribute to early Disney, right? There's a sense of those characters.
Yes.
In the way that these characters are drawn. But I was actually thinking that it doesn't have any labels that say all ages to this, but neither do the things on the facing page, which are pretty clearly aimed at younger readers, perhaps. And even the previous page, the Avatar property has a little anthology, which I always love to give a shout out to Avatar because it's a sort of great work by Gene Yang and various people, Guri Hiru once again. But yeah, Dark Horse doesn't have that same labeling that we just talked about with Image, where it's not distinguishing its target audience for either its licensed work or American Gods or whatever. I think that's kind of cool. I kind of like that because I feel like Dark Horse tries to do stuff that it's not pigeonholing who its readers might be. And Langridge is the kind of creator that works, his stuff for young readers winds up being super appealing to me as an adult. So
right. I think he works really well across age groups.
Absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. So,
and you're right in that Dark Horse is not doing what we see, at least this month, in the Image section. But again, I don't remember Image indicating its audience target in previous preview issues. Maybe they did, and I just didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah. Who knows? Might be helpful at some point, though, to make clear that Saga is not for kids.
Well, let me see. The very first page of the very first issue. Yeah, I think that's kind of a giveaway.
Oh, man. Sometimes I have Saga laying around the house, and I'm just like, let me put this away.
Glad I don't have to worry about that anymore.
But speaking of young readers, on the facing page of Criminy, this Rocket Robinson and the Secret of the Saint, we don't have to say much about it, but Sean O'Neill also looks interesting. Two characters flying on the cover with a monkey hanging onto one of them's neck. That's an instant sell for me. So looks like a 1933 sort of period adventure in France. So I'll check that out.
Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but for some reason I thought that maybe you and Gwen had discussed a previous volume of Rocket Robinson. But I guess not.
No. Yeah, no, not that I know of.
Okay, maybe what I'm thinking about is with the previous volume of Rocket Robinson, I think I may have maybe passed on word to you guys and said, hey, is this something you may want to consider? That's what I'm thinking about, I guess.
Okay. All right, well. So yeah, I guess there was previous Rocket Robinson, although I didn't notice that before, but.
Do you go anywhere next, or do you have anything else in Dark Horse?
Only to note that on page 122, there's this, Eromanga Sensei. And, I guess I was, just noting that Dark Horse manga is still with Dark Horse, even though Viz and the other sort of Kodansha and all the manga publishers, manga only publishers, I guess, are in their separate section. So, I was curious when they were talking about manga being in a separate section, how that would play out for publishers like Dark Horse who do publish manga.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. And even though to a large degree it makes sense to have the manga in a section by itself, because people who gravitate toward manga, I mean, right there, it's everything, that they would want. What do you do with publishers like Dark Horse? And in addition, Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly are two big ones as well. But there are others as well. I know that Retrofit Big Planet has a work of manga coming out pretty soon. And then there are other smaller presses that you have the same thing. So, it makes sense to have, let's say, Viz, Yen Press, Kodansha. In other words, publishers that specialize exclusively, let's say, on manga, having them in the manga section. But then what do you do with publishers like Dark Horse and Drawn and Quarterly that occasionally publish manga? And in fact, with Dark Horse, it's not even occasionally. They do so on a regular basis.
That's right. Yeah. And actually there's after the one I mentioned, another one. And, the other thing about Dark Horse manga is that, I don't know if this is totally fair, but with like Drawn and Quarterly or Fantagraphics manga, they might be horror or they might be seinen or shonen or whatever, but they tend to be literary manga. Yes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And, but a lot of the stuff Dark Horse publishes, like this Arrow Manga Sensei, is based on a light novel about a light novel to adapt it into comics, or adapt it into manga, right? Mm-hmm. Manga is comics, but Fushimi, Tsukasa Fushimi is the writer, and I think wrote a series of light novels about a writer of light novels who finds an artist to draw, and it winds up being sister or something like that, and all kinds of interesting things happen. We should mention the artist here is Rin. Mm-hmm. But I don't know about the pedigree of this work. It's a popular anime that is now being adapted into manga, but I just know that like Dark Horse does a lot of stuff that you might find from Viz or you might find from Kodansha, and not even necessarily like Viz signature. And so I just feel like it's a weird placement thing with the catalog when you have stuff like this. Yeah.
And in fact, I was going to highlight the only other thing I had in Dark Horse was Era Manga Sensei by Fushimi and Ren, but I was going to mention it not for the reasons that you did, because this is something that I'm interested in, and I don't know, maybe Sean and I, or Shay and I, can discuss this on a future manga show, because the premise sounds interesting, although I will say that it's not often, I don't remember Shay and I discussing any manga title that began as another medium. So, for instance, started off as either a light novel or as anime and then was adapted into manga form. Because usually it's the other way around, right? Where something is a successful manga series and then it becomes anime. But I don't know, this seemed interesting. And because of that dynamic, because of that cross-genre adaptive thing that they have going on here in the description, that got my attention. So, and it says that, it was a successful anime that ran on Crunchyroll last year. So, I don't know. Not every work of manga the Dark Horse comes out with, I will read, but many of them do. I know that I'm a big fan of I Am a Hero, which I continue to keep up with. And Shay and I discussed the first volume of that, I think a couple of years ago. Wandering Island, I think that's the title, from about a year ago, was phenomenal. And I think it's one of those titles that we're going to have to wait quite a while for the second volume. But I loved that work. And other manga that Dark Horse has come out with, I really enjoy.
Yeah. I go next to IDW. Is that?
Well, I mean, we have the DC Vertigo section. And so if we want to include, because there are a few DC pages before that, right? Before IDW.
That's true. Do you want to jump over that? We can do that.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay. I only have two things in the DC catalog, but I do want to start off before we start talking about any solicits by griping a bit.
Sure.
We were talking about some of the changes to previews that work and some that don't work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I have no problem with DC doing their own catalog. What I don't like is the fact that DC has kind of combined everything regardless of line or imprint alphabetically. So in terms of the single issues, we get the regular DC universe, we get the Young Animal, we get the New Heroes line New Age of Heroes line, and we get Vertigo. Now, mixing all of that up, I found a little annoying. I mean, it's not completely troublesome because at the top of the page, you get a little image, right? So a regular DC title is going to have the DC logo. New Age of Heroes is going to have the DC logo with, I think red, it says New Age of Heroes. Vertigo, you get the Vertigo symbol. Same thing with Young Animal. However, there's something to be said for having all of the Young Animal stuff together, for having the Vertigo stuff together, and for having the, regular DC and other DC line material together. And so they do that for both the single issues, for the collections and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, it's not difficult. I'm not saying it's difficult to go through the catalog and decide what I'm interested in. I would just rather they group material according to either imprint or line. Yeah.
No, I could see a strong case for that. And I wonder if their reasoning is just like, hey, if you're going to come look for Cave Carson, you're going to have to go through Aquaman, Yeah. And that to some extent, I mean, this is definitely true of maybe all but the Vertigo, and there's also sometimes fuzzy borders on that. These imprints are all supposed to be, intersecting, overlapping universe type things, And, so I could see a case for either way. Personally, it's all too much for me to process anyway. So either way, it's going to be a trudge through, not a trudge. It's not unpleasant. It's just going to be a long haul to get through all the DC stuff and the many different imprints and keeping track of their, rapidly expanding, worlds, which, I'm happy for the success of DC in the last couple of years. I think a strong DC is really good for the comics market, especially because they have this, they have this legacy, this, DNA in their blood to do Vertigo type things, and I just hope for the success of that stuff too. But yeah, we can blame retcon. We can blame Milkman Man in reference to our Milk Wars conversation.
Well, I just wish they would do more Vertigo stuff. I mean, it's unfortunately, we've seen over the past several years, fewer and fewer Vertigo titles. I mean, Vertigo's still around, but there's just not that much of it anymore. But again, we have publishers that are coming along over the past few years who are kind of filling those gaps, and also certain imprints within other publishers. So, for instance, you got Black Crown over at IDW. You have Burger Books at Dark Horse. And of course, we have Aftershock doing a lot of stuff that, let's say, Vertigo used to do. So, I mean, there are those gaps that are being filled in, I guess. It's just I have a particular fond, feeling for Vertigo, and I just wish that it were stronger than it was. It seems to be right now.
That's right.
But what do you have, if anything, in the DC catalog?
Apart from the superhero fair that I'm into, Astro City, well, that's superhero stuff too, but Astro City Broken Century, hardcover, which is on page 59 of the DC Previews catalog. So Astro City has stopped, I think you mentioned this, has stopped doing single issues and gone straight to collections. And so this is a new Astro City collection. And so it was really sad. Astro City is the only series that I have consistently collected from start to finish in single issues. And now there are no more single issues to be had. So I took that as a good time to just cut myself off from single issue collecting, period. But here we are with the continuation of the story, but now I'm sorry, actually I'm wrong. Let me correct myself. This is a collection of the last issues that came out in single issue.
I was going to mention this, and this is one of the only two things that I wanted to highlight in the DC catalog this month. And this one, Astro City Broken Century, is, I'm assuming, the last collection that we're going to get in the older incarnation of Astro City. From what I understand, we're going to continue getting Astro City, but in, I guess you could call it graphic novel or long form instead of single issues.
Right. Yeah. Correct. I stand corrected, but I am excited about this nonetheless because these last few issues, I think they were pretty significant. So it's getting a hardcover treatment. So it seems like it's ramping up for that kind of collections oriented run.
And that's what I like that they've been doing over the past few years with Astro City is we have the individual issues, and then when it's first collected, They'll do so in hardbound editions, and then later on they'll come out with a paperback edition. So I think that's good. But what that means though is, I immediately got on board with the hardbound collections, and so of course I had to continue with the hardbound editions and not the paperback for matters of consistency.
Sure. Shelf mismatch is really frustrating.
That's right. First world problems.
That's right. That's right. What's your other DC pick?
The only other DC pick is on page 67 of the DC catalog, and this is something that I've been interested in, but I haven't read yet, but now it's being collected in a trade paperback. Exit Stage Left, The Snagglepuss Chronicles, and this is written by Mark Russell with art by a variety of different creators. Yeah. So now, have you been reading Exit Stage Left?
No, I read the first issue. It looked good, and not for any particular reason did I jump off of it. But I mean, I've heard that it stays interesting. It's a sort of Tennessee Williams, Snagglepuss as Tennessee Williams story. And, Mark Russell's past work is, of course, phenomenal, from Flintstones to Prez and stuff like that. So this is something I'm looking forward to, too. Yep. I'll catch up with it when it's collected, too.
Do you have anything else in the DC catalog?
No, I'm ready to go to IDW if you are.
Okay, where do you start in IDW?
I start on page 139. Do you have before that?
God, man, you're right. Great minds are thinking alike. I swear, this is one time after another. Where I go, that's where you were going to go, and where you go, that's where I was going to go. So yeah.
The reality is that you are my hero and comics mentor, Derek. So it's probably that I'm following after your path, your shadow. So.
I don't know about that, but
yeah. But this is good stuff. You want to talk about this?
Yeah, and I'm assuming you mean Real Science Adventures, the Nicodemus Job #1, and not Dungeons and Dragons, Evil and Baldur's Gate #4.
Nothing against Dungeons and Dragons,
Nothing against them.
But you're totally right.
Yeah, I'm a big Brian Clevenger fan. I've gotten behind on my Atomic Robo readings. But here we have the first issue of a new series, Real Science Adventures, that every now and again Clevenger kind of breaks up his Atomic Robo stories with these Real Science Adventure narratives. And this one is called The Nicodemus Job.
Yep. With art by Meredith McLaren, who, if folks are familiar with McLaren's art, is really cool. I really like that art style. And so it'll be cool. I'm not sure if they've connected before. I'm not sure if they've collaborated before, but I like Atomic Robo a lot. Like you, I'm super behind, but it's sort of reliable to come back to and still be good. So this will be good. Yeah. Oh, well, after that, I go to Big Hero 6 #1, which is on page 141, which I'll just throw in the same note that I had with Incredibles #2, which is another great animated movie that I'll enjoy reading in comics form. And, actually, as we move on in the catalog, there'll be a lot of things that I might as well tag with my daughter tag, which is that stuff I like reading with my daughter. And we've watched this movie together, and it was a thrill ride. So it'll be kind of fun. Oh, actually, most significantly, writer Hannah Blumenreich. Do you know Hannah Blumenreich?
I do not.
So she did a sort of self-created and not authorized Spider-Man webcomic for a time that was so witty and so much fun and so so good that, I actually eventually Marvel went ahead and hired her to do a couple of short pieces in a couple of anthology things. And I can't remember what else she's written.
They didn't sue her?
Yeah, right. It's remarkable. That's how good the stuff was. Instead of suing her, they hired her. So
there's the lesson, right? If you're going to steal licensed property, do a damn good really job. Well. Yes. So.
Maybe you'll get a job. But here she is doing Big Hero 6. So yeah, that's going to be fun. And, she just, I will send you the link, Derek, one day to that, Hannah Blumenreich stuff, Spider-Man stuff. But there's a lot of really fun Peter Parker, you know what I mean? And, so I think she has a way of, just kind of witty and, expressive, stories. And this will be, this should be really fun. And, loved that movie. So I'm on board for this.
This is interesting. This is the second Disney property that you've mentioned. Mm-hmm. And, I'll have to be honest with you. Whenever I see Disney, my reaction is to pull away.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I tend to think of Disney as the evil empire. And so even something as good as The Incredibles, and don't get me wrong, I really loved the first Incredibles. But still, the fact that it has Disney associated with it, it makes me recoil a bit. And that's just my prejudices.
No, I totally get that. I mean, this page that we're looking at, because Big Hero 6 is on one side, on the other is this IDW Star Wars Adventures that's been going for a while. And you have Elsa Charretier, who is a fantastic, phenomenal artist, working on this stuff. And then right underneath is the Star Wars newspaper strips. I mean, that's just kind of a mini history right there of how licensed corporate stuff is getting its way into, I mean, it always has, just like with Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson doing Star Wars newspaper. But it just kind of, I like to separate things as well. I like to say I'm a comics fan and a comics purist, tend to skip over most of the licensed stuff, but sometimes they net creators on them because they have attachment to those properties that make it irresistible for me. And so I can never be as dogmatically principled about resisting licensed comics as I mean to be.
Yeah. See, to me, it's not even licensed properties because I have no problem with that. It's Disney. It's the fact Disney. That it's Disney.
Yeah.
But that's me.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I'm sympathetic.
Where do you go after that?
156.
Yes, I do as well. And in fact, this is the Black Crown section of IDW. Yep. And I think that there are a couple of things worth mentioning on this actually 2-page spread, 156 and 157. And I would guess that you and I are highlighting the same thing on 156. And this is the trade collection of Tini Howard and Gilbert Hernandez's Assassinistas.
Absolutely.
Glad to see that this is finally collected. And since it's not Assassinistas Volume 1, I'm guessing this is all the Assassinistas that we're going to get.
Yeah, I can, Gilbert has a penchant for doing these short, series and enclosed stories. And I've been reading Assassinistas and super interesting. So that'll be good. And we also see in what I'm assuming is your other pick here, Tini Howard on Euthanauts, which is on the facing page. So it seems like maybe Howard is moving on to Euthanauts, Gilbert going back to, of course, Love and Rockets.
Love and Rockets, among other things, I'm sure that he has underway. Yeah, and Euthanauts seems really interesting. So this is, you're right, Tini Howard, again, the writer of Assassinistas, with art by Nick Robles. And the premise here seems interesting. It says, death is like outer space, a seemingly unknowable, terrifying blackness that yields beautiful discoveries and truths. If only you've got the right kind of rocket ship. Thalia Rosewood has a lifelong obsession with death, keeping her from living her life to the fullest. Mercy Wolf has a brain tumor the size of a billiard ball and a need for a new recruit before her next journey begins. Inigo Hanover is a reluctant tether to the world beyond, seeking to continue a cycle that exploration would halt. Go toward the light, then go beyond. Euthanauts. There's a lot packed in that solicit. Yep. I mean, you can already tell the number of characters is starting to, I don't know, maybe potentially make the narrative top heavy. I'm hoping in an okay way, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what drew me here, I've liked Assassinistas, so I'm interested in where Tini Howard goes next, but it was really the visuals that drew me to this because, I don't know Nick Robles' previous work, but you have some sci-fi stuff here. You have what looks like a bacchanalia. You have ornate decoration, there's just a variety of stuff and it's all like pretty gorgeously drawn. So, it looks like really, wild. It looks like it's going to go in a lot of different directions and that'll be cool.
Yeah. And, we mentioned earlier that, Black Crown, the imprinted, IDW is one of those lines that seems to be doing what, Vertigo had done, quite, energetically a number of years ago. So, I mean, and this does look like very much a Vertigo-ish title.
Yeah, that'll be good. Black Crown doing well.
Now, after that, I go to page 161. Do you have anything before that?
No, let's go to 161.
In 161, this is something that I had heard about, but I've not yet read. This is Rick Veitch's Brat Pack, which originally came out, I think, in the 1990s, and it deals with sidekicks. And it's supposed to be his satiric take on this. Again, I'd heard of it, but I hadn't read it. But now we have a new, is this hardbound or? Yeah, hardbound version of Brat Pack. So I don't know if I'll get it, but it's definitely something that I would like to get.
Yeah. Looks interesting. It looks Rick Veitch.
After that, where do you go?
After that, I'm at 165, where there's a creator credit that is very interesting.
Yeah. I'm there as well for probably the same reason.
Sure. Should I talk about this?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is IDW's Full Bleed, which is their big comics and culture quarterly. And the second volume, I actually just recently backed this and the first volume because I didn't get the first volume initially because $25 at the time. But now for $50, I went ahead and got both of them. Volume 2, it's called Full Bleed, the Comics and Culture Quarterly, Volume 2, Deep Cuts, and a compilation of lots of cool stuff, including stuff by Bob Fingerman and various other writers doing columns and pieces, and also interviews, and Nitty Okorafor, and also Derek Royal and Andy Kunka.
This is the first time my name has ever appeared in a Previews catalog.
Really? Even for academic books?
Yeah, and in fact, that's a point of contention. I'm not too happy that my various publishers where I've come out with books haven't made sure that they're solicited. But
sorry,
but this is
bring up a sore subject.
Yeah, I know. Thank you for bringing that up, by the way. But no, you did bring up the fact that both Kunka and I are listed here in Full Bleed. Actually, it says that there's an interview with Gilbert and Jaime Hernandez. Actually, what this is a transcription of a panel that Andy and I moderated at Heroes Con last year. We were asked to moderate a panel on the Hernandez brothers, and so it turned out really well. The only thing that's not transcribed is the audience questions and response toward the end of the panel, and the main reason for that is sound quality. The mics really weren't picking up the questions well, and so it was kind of iffy as to what people were asking. But that's okay because the majority of the panel discussion where Andy and I were asking Gilbert and Jaime various questions was definitely substantive enough.
Right.
So, and I've seen, obviously a galley of the interview or the panel transcription, and I can say that Dirk Wood, who is the editor of Full Bleed, did an outstanding job overseeing the look and the layout of this interview. And that just speaks to the kind of things that you're going to find throughout Full Bleed. So it's not just, my and Andy's conversation with the Hernandez brothers. I mean, it really does have a good look to it. I'm one of those who backed Full Bleed for the full year during the first Kickstarter. So, I'm going to get these issues.
Yeah.
It really is good. It's interesting because it's described as a magazine, but it's a hardcover magazine.
A 200-page hardcover.
Yes.
Right.
Which is really interesting. I didn't know about many, or I guess the history of hardcover magazines. I just thought it was kind of strange. Hardcover magazine. Interestingly enough, around the time that they were doing the Full Bleed Kickstarter, this is when I interviewed Seth, if you remember, early this year. Yeah.
Right.
And maybe this is when around the time that the first volume of Full Bleed came out. But I mentioned something to Seth because, something to look forward to. I don't know if it will be in volume 3 of Full Bleed or volume 4, but a transcription of my earlier this year interview with Seth will appear in Full Bleed.
Awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll get my name maybe again in previews. But I mentioned Full Bleed to him. He hadn't heard of it, but he said, "Oh yeah, there's a rich tradition of hardcover magazines." And I mean, this is something that of course Seth would know. The marginalia, the older, the archival kind of information. Yeah. And so he was telling me all of these examples, and I was just amazed. But yeah, there's apparently a rich tradition here, and Dirkwood and IDW are following in those steps. So I highly recommend Full Bleed, and not just because I'm going to be in volume 2.
Yeah. I mean, I love the respect for the art that, and the aesthetics of comics that a hardcover treatment, is going to give the work. And so, I'm really excited to read this. And of course, excited to see your interviews transcribed there. That'll be cool.
Yeah. If we turn the page, that's where I go next, 166.
I'm looking at the Corto Maltese. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, actually, a couple of things. One is the Corto Maltese. This is the next in the Corto Maltese series. This is Tango, of course, by Hugo Pratt. And I've been enjoying those. Not that I've read all of these within the Hugo or the Corto Maltese series from IDW and their Eurocomic series, your imprint. But those that I've read, I really enjoy.
Same, exact same.
Yeah.
But above too, yeah.
Yes, above is a book called Atomic Empire, and this is written by Terry Smulderen with art by Alexandra Clarice. And this is not the first time. I guess this won't be the only time that Smulderen's name will come up. This seems like an interesting title, and I guess this is also part of IDW's Euro comic series. It says, an astonishing and captivating original graphic novel, inspired by a real psychological case. Atomic Empire is both a psychiatric enigma and a space opera. 1953, the world has entered the age of the atom, but one man wonders what it means for civilization. His name is Paul, a sci-fi writer who, since childhood, has been in telepathic contact with a hero from a distant future. But when a well-known Pentagon consultant begins to take an interest in him, the man who communicates with the future will commit an unforgivable sin and break an oath to his friend Zarth Arn, hero of the Galactic Empire.
Yeah, I think like many of my now increasing forays into European comics, I'm convinced that I like reading this stuff best in paper. That's problematic for my bookshelf space, but it is, the print size of Corto Maltese and just seeing the work.
You're talking about as opposed to digital?
Yeah, as opposed to digital. Right. Yeah. Which I have picked up some digital, the Europe Comics sort of digital outfit that's been putting out a lot of European comics in translation digitally. That's good stuff, and I think it's just more accessible, but I'm finding that so much of this work is visually so cool. I just want to see it on the page, and this is one of those cases. Atomic Empire that is to say.
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
That's all I have in IDW. Do you have anything else?
Just a quick note on the facing page of what we were just looking at. So 1667, a couple of young adult titles that look like they're also of European, origin. But The Quest of Iwalan, Volume 1, From One World to Another, written by a writer named Lillian and art by Lawrence Baldetti. Looks good. Just that cover art looks like very cool fantasy stuff that, it says it's targeted toward teens in the tradition of Narnia and Madeleine L'Engle stuff. So that'll be interesting. I think I might want to check that out. But that's all I got.
And then one underneath, Kingdom of the Dwarfs by Rob Walsh and David Wenzel, also is, I guess, geared toward a younger audience. And this is interesting because we see at the top of this page, 167, young adult. So IDW is doing what we saw Image doing. Yeah. Is letting us know who the target audience is.
Yeah. It's the buying habits of different shops of young adult or kid comics is far less consistent than adult stuff. So I find that I have to go through previews sometimes to find all the stuff that is good out there, So sometimes it's a toss, it's a toss up whether or not it's going to show up at your local shop. My local shop is awesome about that, but I just mean, you kind of never know if they'll catch it, if they'll actually order it. So I feel like, seeking these things out in previews is a good way to kind of keep tabs on, emergent parts of the young adult market. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if we're finished with IDW, I guess the next section is Dynamite. Do you have anything in Dynamite?
I just had a brief mention of the James Bond case files, but do you have anything else?
No, that's exactly the one thing that I was going to mention in Dynamite as well.
Great minds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's go ahead. Well, why don't you riff on it a little bit?
Well, this is on page 189, and it's James Bond Case Files Volume 1. And what we have here is collected in hardcover, as they typically do with the James Bond series at Dynamite, a hardbound treatment. These are the various shorter pieces and one-shots that have come out under the James Bond title. So this collects Service, Moneypenny, Solstice, and M one-shots plus bonus. So I'm interested in this. I've been getting the James Bond collections. Do you enjoy the Dynamite James Bond?
I haven't been following it. It's really the pedigree of your Kieran Gillans and your Ibrahim Mustafas and Declan Shalvey's that has me interested in this. Plus, I'm a sucker for Tula Lotte covers, which we have here, and we actually have in the following page with some of the Nancy Drew stuff that they've been doing. And I did read this Moneypenny one shot, which was really cool. So that's what caught my eye about this. But no, I actually haven't been reading the other. What is it? Is it Warren Ellis that's been writing a lot of this James Bond stuff?
He had been, at the beginning.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I was going to ask you, and maybe I should ask you off air instead of asking you for a commitment on mic, but one of the things I'd like to do at a future date, and we don't have to do it with the release of Case Files Volume 1, but at some point is for us to do an episode devoted to Dynamite's James Bond. Because now we have so many storylines and so many collections now to go with that. So you'd be down for that?
I definitely would. I'm not a huge Bond guy. I've actually read more of the novels than I've seen of the movies, which is kind of what an embarrassing dork I am. But yeah, I'd definitely be down for the comics. These, as they've been coming out, the aesthetics, they're so cool. I mean, from design to, some of the artists inside. So I've been wanting to check these out. I just sort of haven't gotten it together to read them all.
Yeah. So that was the only mention you had in Dynamite as well? Yeah. So let's move over to Boom Studios.
Boom.
Which is now, I guess, the last publisher, at least in this issue of previews, in the premiere section.
Yeah. Again, interesting if what you thought, what you predicted, comes true, that they maybe get they get a chance at the top next month. Let's wait and see.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. But no, I start with the first one, which is Jim Henson's Beneath the Dark Crystal, and I don't remember if you've made mention of any of the Jim Henson stuff that Boom has been doing with the storyteller things and stuff like that. I haven't, and I'm not even a very big fan of Labyrinth, but I have been seeing these, various bits and pieces of this Boom Jim Henson stuff get a lot of critical acknowledgement and even some award nominations and things like that. And we have Adam Smith writing this, which is his follow-up to The Wealth of Nations, I believe, and illustrated.
Boy, I didn't know he did comics too.
Right? Yeah. No, it's a big leap. He's versatile. And Alexandria Huntington illustrated. And just, the Jim Henson work and how elaborate that puppet stuff was, that Into the Dark Crystal and all these things, it made up a lot of my imagination, my fantasy imagination, the fantasy imagination of my childhood. But it also was kind of scary for me. And so that David Bowie, I can't get that out of my head. And so I feel like exploring this work will be kind of an exploring of how that art translates, 20, 30 years later. So it'll be this is a place that I'm wondering if I want to jump on to look at the Jim Henson stuff at Boom.
Yeah, I'll have to admit that the Jim Henson Boom material hasn't really drawn me in yet, whether it be Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, or anything like that, any of the Jim Henson stuff. Not that I don't like what Jim Henson did. I mean, I think he's a legend. And of course he died too young, but I don't know. I'm not the biggest fantasy guy, and so that is another reason why it hasn't drawn me.
Yeah, I understand that too. Yeah.
But where I begin in Boom is actually, if you turn the page to 208, we get something that genre-wise is much more up my alley than fantasy, and that is horror. Bone Parish #1, written by Cullen Bunn and illustrated by Serif and Mustafa Karasu. Cullen Bunn, he's a great writer. I haven't read everything that he's done. I've read many things that he's done. I love it when he not only does horror titles, but also when he mashes up different genres. Like, for instance, he does in The Sixth Gun, which is a mashup of the Western and in horror.
Yeah.
But, and also maybe a bit of lightheartedness. But here, I mean, I don't think that there's anything lighthearted about Bone Parish.
About Bone Parish. Yeah. And Parish meaning Parish of the Parish Parish, although I'm sure it's a play on words in some sense. What's interesting about this is that, the cover's by Lee Garbett, who we talked about with Skyward a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Amazing artist. And then the other variant by Rod Rice. So both well-known artists, but it's actually the illustration by the actual artist Serafin Mustafa Karasu that caught my eye on this page. That's pretty gorgeous. So I'm interested in this too. This is where you and I differ a little bit. This is not my genre, but the look of that work is just so good. So I'm interested in this too. Yeah.
After that, where do you go?
Actually, on the very next page, there's a new series called Ruin World. It says it's number 1 of 5, so it's a mini series, but it's written and illustrated by Derek Loffman, whose work I don't know, but there's a fantastic animated style to this series, and looks like it's targeted toward younger readers, perhaps. But sword wielding fox and pig being attacked by tentacled creatures was very fun, very cool animated style. It just looks phenomenal. Not sure how the storytelling will go, but it says it's perfect for fans of Adventure Time and the Adventure Zone, which my daughter is. So maybe this will be fun for us to venture into together. Ruin World is what it's called. Yes.
You say your daughter's a fan of Adventure Time and the Adventure Zone?
Actually, we don't allow her to go to the Adventure Zone. No, I'm just kidding. But we do have Adventure Time. No, I don't even know what the Adventure Zone is.
Okay, I was going to say, for the Adventure Zone, hold that thought.
Okay, good. We'll come back to the Adventure Zone, but definitely an Adventure Time fan. And I think Laufman is listed here as an Adventure Time Comics contributor. So that looks good.
Yeah. Well, if we turn the page, my next solicit of interest on 212 is something else that probably your daughter would appreciate. This seems to be for younger readers. This is a boombox title, Alice from Dream to Dream. This is an original graphic novel. It's in softcover. It's written and illustrated by Giulio Maccioni.
That's pretty good.
Am I pronouncing the name correctly?
I'm pretty sure that's a Giulio.
Yeah.
But Matt, there's a lot of vowels in that last name. So
it says Alice can enter and share dreams by sleeping near someone, a power utterly outside her own control. After moving back to Cincinnati, Alice is stuck sharing a bedroom with her brother, and worse, sharing his dreams. The bright spot in her life is her best friend, Jamie, but there's more history between their families than Alice realized, and there are secrets buried deep. And so I find it interesting that this is using the trope of the dream and entering dream worlds and sharing dream space. That's fascinating to me. And also the fact that the main character is named Alice. And so, there are also a number of resonances that brings.
Sure. Absolutely. Also interesting that with the ability to do something like that, enter others' dreams, you would move to Cincinnati. Just kidding. No shade on Cincinnati. My brother's in Ohio, and it's a beautiful town.
Dreaming of Siegel and Schuster.
That's right. That's true. Oh yeah, that's right. That's where.
Or Harvey Pekar.
That's right. Yeah. So Cincinnati, Cleveland, that whole neck of the woods. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it does look gorgeous, and I love the preview pages, and I love that Boom is giving us these preview pages, by the way. I mean, this is a run of books now that, each one, the art is quite different in style, but, man, so impressive. So this is a good month for Boom, and that carries over into the next page, which I don't know if you flagged that as well.
No, I didn't, but I'm glad that you're bringing this up.
Yeah, another OGN. It looks like another, this is a Kaboom, and it's Petals by Gustavo Borges. 48-page book, so really kind of a European looking book, but another anthropomorphic but much gentler, much more gentlemanly maybe. But there's this just wonderfully rendered snow and you know, in the woods, and it's a debut graphic novel. It says it will steal your heart with this silent comic. So I'm always impressed when that's done well. So I'm sure it'll be a quick read, but it might be one where you can reread and savor in the art, and I'll be interested in reading Petals.
Well, speaking of stealing your heart, I originally didn't list this as something that I wanted to bring up as a solicit, but I've turned to the page, and I want to mention this nonetheless. So this is on 216, Tony Millionaire's Sea Monsters coloring book.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Millionaire and the Mockies, and also Sock Monkey, for that matter. But
you're right.
I think it's great. I mean, I never mention coloring books when we go through the Previews catalog, but I'll mention this just because it's Tony Millionaire. And I love the Mockies, Drinky Crow, Uncle Gabby. But here we have the emphasis on sea monsters.
It strikes me looking at this that Tony Millionaire is a great artist to make a coloring book out of. Mm-hmm. And I think that'd be a really fun conversation just to think of like all the great like underground. I mean, the aforementioned Picard would be a really interesting coloring book. Yeah. Millionaire for sure. That style lends itself to some very interesting coloring book fodder.
Although with Picard stuff, he wouldn't be listed or credited for the most part because he has other people do the art.
Of course, yeah. No, I'm thinking, of course, of collaborators. I'm thinking of Cleveland, actually. Yeah.
And I only have one other thing in Boom. I don't know if you have anything else.
I was just going to mention Klaus, but...
Again, great minds. This is on page 224.
Yep.
Klaus, The New Adventures of Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Yeah, by Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. Dan Mora, just a phenomenal artist. And this, I think Klaus, The New Adventures of Santa Claus, collects, I guess, later series, Klaus and the Witch of Winter, and then Klaus and the Crisis in Christmasville. Now, I didn't read those, but I did read the first Klaus that came out, over 2 years ago now. And I was really bowled away about this. Now, I don't know about the New Adventures, but, I'm always on board for almost anything that Grant Morrison does.
Right. I hadn't read these either. I think they were one-shots maybe.
Right.
Just they must have been super long one-shots because it's 128 pages for the two stories
or short
together.
Series maybe.
Or shorter series, yeah. Yeah, no, me too. I have this sort of beautiful hardcover of the first Klaus series, and so I'm going to check out this. Yep. But that does it for me with Boom.
So after Boom, we go to the back half, or what you could call the green section, where we have a variety of smaller publishers. Yeah. Or publishers who aren't a part of the premiere section at the beginning. and there's a lot to choose from here. Now, I don't have anything until page 266. I don't know if you have anything before that.
Let me do some selective picking here. 266. Yeah, actually, I don't know that I have either. Maybe just a brief foray into Aftershock on 255. There's a new series called Clan Killers. Which that title doesn't necessarily grab me, except Sean Lewis, who's had a few image series like The Few, has been I said The Few image series like The Few, and Coyotes. It's got a series here called Clan Killers with Antonio Fuso, and I don't know, it's maybe like this sort of Mignola-esque quality of the cover that caught my eye.
Yeah, so, I hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned this, but you're right. It does have that Mignola look.
It's an ancient Ireland filled with clans, mystics, warriors, and monsters of mythic proportions. So, who knows? We'll see.
I'm glad you pointed this out because it's sad that this is the case. I don't pay attention to Aftershock releases as much as I used to for this reason. They're coming out with so much material that after a while, it's almost like new title overload. Now, one could argue, well, why isn't that the case with Image? Well, the thing is, Image is a larger publisher, and it has a more paginated section in previews, so they can spread the love, so to speak. But with Aftershock, And, the things that I've read from Aftershock, for the most part, I've really enjoyed. And I think they put out some really good quality stuff. The thing is, there's something new coming out all the time that I think I'm apt to overlook it, especially given the design of the Aftershock section. Because in terms of, let's say, the background color, where you have all the solicits and the covers, there's no difference. It has this kind of, dark red, blood red look to it. At least in this month's catalog. And so when there's no variation in the design and layout of the various pages, it seems to be kind of a visual hum to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see it becoming something you just start passing through as you flip.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Derek, would you say you're developing some animosity toward these works?
Okay, that's it. We're going to stop the podcast episode right now. I'm sorry, my friend. That went too far.
You're treating it like brilliant trash. No. There is actually, I got to say, well, just as an example, one of the Aftershock books that's been getting some attention is Baby Teeth by Donny Cates and Gary Brown. Mm-hmm. And I've read it, and it's just dark. And a lot of the stuff is pretty dark. And I realized, I can definitely see the merits of this stuff, and I have enjoyed Animosity, and I get it that people really like it. It's just a little dark for me, and so the tone is maybe just not for me. But it's not stuff that I would cast aspersions on anyone else for enjoying. Right. It's just not totally my thing.
Yeah. Although, interestingly enough, next week you and I are going to be discussing, among other things, an Aftershock title.
Yep, that's right. Which I'm looking forward to.
Yes. So if our listeners are wondering which title are we going to discuss, well, tune in next week and find out.
That's right. We'll keep it a little surprise.
Mm-hmm. And then do you have anything before 266 after that?
I don't go until 284.
Okay. So on page 266 is something under the Amazing Ink Slave Labor Graphics section.
Sorry. Yes, I did have this as well.
Yeah.
My bad.
And this is Let Go, written by Ted Cupper and John Perry, with art by Cecilia Latilia. And this looks interesting, but one of the reasons why I paid attention to this is because just recently you and I got a solicit and a link to a review copy for this.
Yeah.
Which is good, because I wouldn't have known. I probably wouldn't have paid attention to this otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know if you got to thumb through it, but it looks really good.
It does,
read it, but visually it looks great. Mm-hmm. And the writers, Cupper and Perry, are actually podcast co-hosts, so they got that going for them.
Yeah, I noticed that, and I was wondering if maybe we have a, let's say, changing career in the future.
Sure. Let's start spitballing ideas for our comic book together, Derek. But yeah, anything that SLG does, I'm generally interested in. I love that outfit. They haven't been producing quite as much, of late, but this looks good. I think it's hopefully something we can talk about on the show.
Yeah, I hope so as well. And it's interesting that you mentioned that you're on board for, many things that Slave Labor Graphics does. Mm-hmm. That used to be the case with me. Because I think they would, especially because they came out with more titles and more of a variety. I think over the past 3-4 years, they've really toned down the number of things that they've released, or they are releasing or resoliciting the same things over and over. I mean, every now and again, there is a new title that comes out, but it's not often.
Yeah.
And so I just don't, again, it's unfortunate. Like with Aftershock, I just don't pay attention to them every month as I probably would like. But this new title, Let Go, definitely caught my attention. And even if we didn't get the PDF preview via email the other day, I would probably check this out just because the cover or the art on the cover looks eye-catching.
Yeah, it is really good. Good use of color and cool looking car scene going on here. New technologies are arriving, and the family is struggling to adapt. Which, a note on SLG, the sort of main driver there, Dan Votto, I think he and the business are interested in lots of other things, lots of varieties of art, and so pretty engaged in the South Bay Area art scene, including music and stuff like that. And so I think it might just be that there's not as much pushing and driving, but SLG was very intrepid, I think, in breaking ground that now others are, riding on. So always appreciate them.
And another reason to love slave labor graphics is that's where I discovered Evan Dorkin.
That's right. I'm trying to Milk and
Cheese and Dork,
okay.
among other things.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's right. That was all SLG too. Yeah. I'm at 284. Are you before that?
Yeah, I am. And this is more in passing than anything because I'm not going to get it, but I think it's kind of curious. This is on page 271. Archie meets Batman 66, number 1.
Oh, yeah.
This is by Jeff Parker and Michael Morecki with art by Dan Parent and J-Bone. Now, and of course, Mike Allred does the cover. I mean, it's interesting, but I've said on the podcast before that sometimes I get tired of all of these crossovers. And with Archie, we just get one crossover after another. And for other people, if they like that, that's fine. Go for it. I'm not going to read this, or at least I'm not going to go out of my way to read this. I mean, there's a part of me that's curious about this. I wasn't the biggest fan of Batman 66. I thought, okay, it was fine.
The TV series or the comic?
Oh, no, TV series, yes, definitely. I mean, that's when I was a kid, and I grew up watching that. Both original and in reruns. Although in original, I was really, really, really little. But I mean, the comic Batman 66, it was okay, but it didn't really turn me on. But hey, if you like crossovers, and especially if you like Archie, then this is something worth checking out.
Yeah, I just got to say on that page, there's a Dan Parent variant cover E, where Archie is Robin, and he's got his hand on Batman's shoulder and this priceless expression on his face, and he's holding this big thumbs up like, hey, I'm Robin. And Adam West Batman looks like, oh my goodness. Get this kid away from me. It's fantastic.
So after that, you say you go to 284.
I do.
Definitely worth mentioning.
Okay. Are you at Permanent Press?
Yep.
From Avery Hill?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So Permanent Press is by Luke Healy. Avery Hill's great. I love Avery Hill. And the stuff they have come out is always worth checking out for me. And so this is Luke Healy's Permanent Press, and I think it's about his own depression. And so the cover image of a washing machine that's the size of, Grand Canyon sized washing machine that's leaking out into a valley is just this interesting symbolism. Actually, I want to read this text. Afraid of being forgotten by the comics community and unable to find motivation in anything besides jealousy, he sets out to create an award-winning comic that will remedy all of his problems, exploring themes of art and existence through worlds of words and numbers, both real and imagined. Luke Healy's new graphic novel includes the Ignatz Award and Slate Cartoonist Studio Prize nominated story, The Unofficial Cuckoo's Nest Study Companion. So, and I've been able to kind of look at this in advance too, and it looks really, really good. I hope we get to talk about this on the show, and I like Luke Healy's stuff, so here we are. Yeah,
I think we will definitely be discussing Permanent Press on a future episode of the Comics Alternative. Now, I mean, I had the pleasure of having Luke Healy on for an interview not quite 2 years ago. This is when his How to Survive in the North came out from, I think it was Nobrow had put it out.
That's right.
But I've also read the Unofficial Cuckoo's Nest Study Companion, which is a great mini comic. And I absolutely loved it. So, and this is a part of Permanent Press as well. So whether you and I interview Luke Healy or if we discuss it on a review episode, we're going to cover Permanent Press in one form or another.
Oh, that'd be great. If you're listening, Luke Healy, and you want to come on for an interview, we would be super hyped to have you back on the Comics Alternative. But yeah, on that same page, did you catch Windhaven?
I saw it, but I didn't highlight it.
Okay. I think it's new. It's got a spotlight. So, And I've never heard of Spectra, I guess is Bantam Spectra. But it is an adaptation of George R.R. Martin, of course, of Game of Thrones fame. His first novel, this is adapted by Lisa Tuttle, with art by Elsa Charretier. And I'm not a particularly huge Game of Thrones fan, or George, what are they called? Martinites? Martinian. But I'm not necessarily on for that. But as I mentioned earlier, Elsa Charretier's art is very, very cool. And so this is a graphic novel adaptation of Martin's first fantasy novel. So I'm going to check it out. It's called Windhaven.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw the cover art was compelling, but then I saw that George R.R. Martin did the writing, or it was adapted from him. And that's, I don't want to say where it turned me off, because like you, it's not like I dislike him. It's just I'm not a fan of his, and I'm not really a fan of Game of Thrones. I'm the only member of my family who really doesn't watch Game of Thrones. I think I've watched 3 episodes, and then that's it. But every other member,
not into it.
No, it's kind of like I said earlier about comics. There's just so much to read that other things I kind of leave to the wayside. Same thing with television shows, whether they be on HBO or Netflix or whatnot. There are a lot of things that I haven't watched yet.
Right.
And Game of Thrones is low on my list of things that I'd like to catch up on.
One thing I do know that you watch is The Walking Dead. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I've been keeping up with that. I mean, I've been getting tired of it lately, but I've been keeping up with it.
Well, I just wanted to, because right next to Windhaven is Atria Skybound Books, it's called The Quotable Negan. And so it's quotes from Negan, I guess.
Oh, I completely missed that.
Yeah, it's Walking Dead quotes, which I'm not a deadhead or whatever Walking Dead fans are called, but it is one example of the prose books making their way, as we mentioned at the top of the episode, and integrated into the Previews catalog. And so, I'd be like, why isn't Skybound publishing this through Image? Well, it's because it's a prose book, I guess.
Yeah.
So, there it is. Yeah.
Well, if we turn the page, that's where I have my next solicit on 286.
Yeah, me too.
Birdcage Bottom Books.
That's right.
Yeah, this is Eva Mueller's In the Future We Are Dead. And this I knew about because I featured Birdcage Bottom Books when they had their Kickstarter back in February. And so this was one of the titles that we discussed. So it looks really interesting. It says it's a collection of 9 stories, thematically linked in their exploration of mortality. Some stories focus on a young Mueller coming to terms with her growing terror of death. Others show a grown Mueller still grappling with her fears.
Yep.
And I've seen some of the interior art, and it looks really nice.
Does it look like the cover?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, all those things you just said are exactly why I'm interested in it. Your conversation with Birdcage Bottom and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm excited to see this work come out.
Where do you go next?
I have a feeling that you don't have my next one on your list, which will be a rarity here, but it's on page 302. So, do you have anything before that?
Nope, I do not.
Okay, this is almost a random feeling one, but on 302, Capstone Press, and I think this is another example of the prose work integrated here. Capstone Press does a lot of kids, Justice League and Wonder Woman books, but just at the top left, there's a board book, which, a book for little kids called Be a Star Wonder Woman, and it's not comics, and so I won't go long on it, but it's written by Michael Dahl with art by Omar Lozano, and this is a book that I've actually seen in the library before, and I just want to make mention of it here, because the art, as you can see from the cover, is fantastic. I wish I could see a comic drawn by this Omar Lozano illustrator, because that style is just so good. My daughter and I spent days and days tracing those drawings of a little Wonder Woman. So that's all. I just wanted to briefly kind of mention that as we fly by here.
Interesting.
Yeah. But after that, I'm at 309.
Yep, I am as well. This is the Drawn and Quarterly section.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah, and in fact, on this page, there are, I guess, 3 new books from Drawn and Quarterly, 2 of which I was going to highlight.
Yeah, and the third probably we can always mention.
Yeah, and the reason I rarely mention any new Moomin books is because I just haven't jumped on board Moomin.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And so it's from lack of experience, although I'm aware of its significance. It's just I've never gotten around to reading a Moomin collection.
Yeah, and one of these days, it's something I've thought of pitching to Gwen for us to talk about in YR is young readers is the Moomin series, because we have so many new titles to keep up with that we don't have space to cover everything. But one of these days, I do think that a whole lot of kids are still reading. I have a Moomin book right in front of me actually right now, but kids are still reading the classics that are being reprinted by Your Drawn and Quarterlies, Interfantagraphics, and others. Mm-hmm. So I think Moomin would be a fun one to explore. But anyway, let's move on to those other two new Drawn and Quarterly pieces that we have here.
Well, the one at the top of the page is a new book by Lisa Hannawalt, Coyote Dog Girl. Interesting title. It says an homage to and lampoon of Westerns. Coyote Dog Girl is a self-aware, playful subversion of tropes from the producer, production designer of the hit series BoJack Horseman. Coyote is a dreamer and a drama queen, brazen and brave, faithful yet fiercely independent. Together with her trusty steed Red, there's not much too big for her to bite off, chew up, and spit out right into your face if you deserve it. And when Coyote and Red find themselves on the run from a trio of vengeful bad dogs, get clobbered by arrows, and are tragically separated, our protagonist is left fighting for her life and longing for her displaced best friend.
That's right.
Now, are you a fan of Lisa Hannawalt?
I am. Hot Dog Taste Test is not only a book I had fun with, it's one that I bought and gave to friends who don't read comics. And they came back and said they had a lot of fun with it. But my pitch for them was that this is the BoJack Horseman. This is a BoJack Horseman person. And they were like, oh, okay. I've seen that show. I don't know if you've ever watched that show, but quite funny, and quite profound actually. But there's a piece, I think, in a few pages later, and I don't remember who it is, but somebody writes a piece here in this previews recommending Coyote Dog Girl.
Oh, and it's kind of one of their featured titles.
Yeah. Exactly. And talks about Hannawalt always having had a kind of horse, actually they come right out and say a horse fetish, but a bit of a horse obsession. And so that I feel like is going to play into the sort of, fun humor, that Coyote Dog Girl will be. Oh, it says right here, it's a staff pick. So that write-up is on page 325, the one that you just mentioned. Got it. There it is. Yeah. Exactly.
I'll admit, I like Lisa Hannawalt's work, but I'm not the kind of fan that I tend to see of Lisa Hannawalt, because I've seen people who are Lisa Hannawalt fanatics. I mean, they absolutely love her stuff. And I liked well enough Hot Dog Taste Test, especially the sense of humor. Yeah. But it's not the kind of comic narrative that draws me, if for no other reason, because it's not really an ongoing narrative. It's a series of almost strip-like observations, which I think are humorous. And so, I appreciate her sense of humor. But that text didn't really resonate with me as it did with many others. Now, I have not read My Dirty Dumb Eyes. Have you?
No, I haven't.
And by the way, both of these, Hot Dog Taste Test and My Dirty Dumb Eyes, are resolicited on the following page 310. But one of the things that will have me giving Hannawalt a second look is the fact that, at least according to this solicit, this seems to be kind of a longer form story, which is very different than what we get from Hot Dog Taste Test.
Yeah. This might be a good entryway into Hannawalt. Have you ever seen the BoJack Horseman show?
I have not.
Okay. It's worth a watch. I mean, it's sort of like latter-day post-Simpsons smart animation. So, yeah.
Also on that page, though, is something that at least I'm more excited about, and this is Matthew Thurber's art comic.
Yeah, I saw this too, and I actually have to admit I haven't read anything else from Matthew Thurber. Maybe anthology pieces, but what am I missing here?
You and I discussed Thurber when we did our Best American Comics episode several months ago, because he was included in that. Now, Matthew Thurber has been publishing, and I don't know if it's self-published or if it's a very, very small press, art comic. So I'm just guessing that this is a collection of those various individual issues.
Oh, got it. Okay, so he has been in anthologies, and I do remember we read some of his stuff, but there's not a previous book from Thurber that I should know about, huh?
Yeah, and there is, but I'm blanking on other works that he's done.
Okay.
But yeah, this is something that I definitely want to check out. And Thurber is one that I've been seeing more and more referenced.
Yeah, sorry, I temporarily muted to fire up the Google machine to see what we could find here. But
here, in fact, I just did as well. Yeah, these are some titles that I'm aware of. 1-800-MICE, which was a Picture Box books, and I think another Picture Box book. And as we've mentioned before in the podcast, Picture Box is no longer around. Infomaniacs is another book of his. That is worth checking out. So, this art comic is one that I will definitely be getting.
Yeah, looks really good. There's a balloon animal looking out a clear glass window at a flying person. So, it does look good. Mm-hmm. All right.
After the Drawn and Quarterly section, I go, as I usually do, to Fantagraphics.
Yep, me too.
And not just because I tend to link both Fantagraphics and Drawn and Quarterly, but because, one is the Canadian equivalent of the American or the American equivalent of the Canadian publisher, I think, to a large degree. But also alphabetically, they just fall nicely one right after the other. And is usually the case with the Fantagraphics section, the vast majority of the stuff that's here, I'm interested in. And we're looking at pages 316 and 317 here.
Yep.
One thing that is at the top of page 316 that sounds fascinating is another Jacques Tardy book. And this one looks to be something that I guess you would call more biographical than autobiographical, because it deals with his father, René. It is titled I, René Tardy, Prisoner of War in Stalag 11B.
Yeah.
It says it's his homage to his father and a testimony to the silent suffering of a generation of men. Tardy masterfully recreates historical and personal details with remarkable fidelity, guided by extensive research in his father's notes. I have been wanting to do on the Eurocomic show an episode devoted to Jacques Tardy.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be the chance to do so. Yeah.
I would love to hear that. Love to see you do that with Pascal, our new fill in for Edward. But I am also ignorant of Tardy, except that of course know of him and his history with Pilote and stuff like that, but had not read any any of the stuff, although I'd known that Goddamn This War and You Are There had come out in the past from Drawn and Quarterly. So from Fantagraphics. So I'm thinking that this is an opportunity. So every year, Fantagraphics around the wintertime does its Fanabucks deal where you can sort of buy, Fanabucks that are 50% off. And so I always hoard a lot of that and then, buy stuff throughout the year. And so I'm thinking about using this to kind of catch up because I haven't read any of this stuff. Although I've seen Tardy's art and that sort of clear line style that I really, really like. So maybe I, René Tardy, Prisoner of War in Stalag 11B will be a good place to start. And then maybe go from there and check out some of the other stuff that I've missed. Yeah.
Also on that page, this is toward the bottom, is something else that looks interesting, but it's by a creator that I'm not familiar with, Anne Simon. This is the Song of Aglaia,
maybe. Yeah.
And it says this is the first solo graphic novel by cartoonist Anne Simon, presenting a beautifully crafted female spin on the classic heroic myth of Greek literature, tracing the journey of a victimized and then almighty woman with a graceful understanding of human relationships and loving nods to the Bronte sisters, David Bowie, and the Beatles.
There's David Bowie again.
Yes.
It's a good time on this podcast. Come on. But yeah, I saw the same thing and marked it too. It does look interesting. I don't know anything of Anne Simon's previous work. But it just does seem like an interesting melange of stuff. Yeah. So we'll check that out too.
And then on the facing page on 317, there are a number of things worth mentioning as well.
Yeah. This is kind of interesting because we have two works from Fantagraphics Underground, which is kind of a Fantagraphics imprint that, if I remember, you ordered directly from Fantagraphics. But what's interesting about these is, of course, the books themselves and their creators. Right. But it says 2 new direct market exclusive limited edition books. So looks like they're going to put these on the direct market rather than the other way around.
Now, you mentioned that this is part of Fantagraphics Underground imprint. We should also mention that another way of expressing this imprint is their FU imprint.
That's right.
In fact, when I interviewed Gary Groth a few months ago, that's how he referred to it.
That's right.
But I think, and I've read a number of books at this imprint that I really enjoyed. These two, though, I'm particularly interested in. We have Katie Skelly's new book, The Agency. I'm not a big fan of Katie Skelly, but I've liked what I've read. But I tell you,
me too.
I am a very big fan of Noah Van Sciver, and that's the other book that's solicited here, Constant Companion.
Yes. I will have to get this. I will have to find whatever FU way to get this because actually just recently I read St. Cole, which was the last Van Sciver book that I hadn't read. And so now I'm caught up, and now the completist in me, who also just flat out enjoys Noah Van Sciver's work, is going to have to find a way to get Constant Companion. Yeah.
I'm not caught up with Noah Van Sciver's stuff. I haven't read Fanty Bukowski Volume 2. The first volume I did, but I haven't read the second one yet. I also haven't read Johnny Appleseed, but it's in the other room where I have a stack of books to read, like in the immediate future. So
very soon. Yeah. No, both of these look really good.
Exactly. Yeah. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is the Curdle's Adventure Magazine #1.
Yeah, it's an all-new, all-ages comic magazine. It's 48 pages. Kathy Malkasian, one of my favorites from last year, and Robert Gooden, and who I don't know, but I guess it has the title, The Curdles, and a bunch of stuff. But yeah, an anthology of all-ages stuff, and a really cool-looking cover that looks like a combination, a merger somewhere between children's book cover and comics art. So that looks really cool.
Yeah, I remember when Gooden's The Curdles came out. I didn't read it. I didn't get it. But I do remember when it came out. And so I'm curious to see what the Curdles Adventure Magazine is all about. And I'm wondering if it's going to be kind of something like a younger reader anthology, maybe the equivalent of Now.
Yeah, right. Probably with different content.
Oh, yeah.
Than now. But no, they also make the boast the best kids comic mag since the demise of Nickelodeon magazine. So very interesting there. I wish more kids comics magazines existed. Maybe they do, and we overlook them. But man, isn't that a form? Isn't that a way that, like, we digested comics that we wish more of our kids had available? So yeah, that too. That I definitely marked that one as well.
And then the only other thing in the Fantagraphics section that I wanted to point out is the Best of Wits End. Wally Wood's Wits End.
Yeah, Wally Wood.
Yeah. Now, I'm not going to get this because I got the complete Wits End when it came out from Fantagraphics several years ago. But I guess what they're doing is taking a selection, what they consider the best of Wits End, and putting it in this one volume. It's a hardbound collection. So I thought it was paperback, but it's hardbound. So you don't have to get the 2-volume complete Wits End. You can get this best of one single, as they say, handsome volume.
Yeah.
As opposed to Butt Ugly.
They don't have those editions. No. Fantagraphics doesn't do the Butt Ugly editions. They do have the FU line though. But Wits End, of course, is Wally Wood's short-lived magazine, like comics magazine that he had, Wally Wood and several of his friends. But I'm curious because this is the best of, so it's weird because it says 240 pages above, but 280 in the solicit text. How big, how massive is the complete Wits End?
Oh, I'd have to fish that out and see. But like I said, it's in 2 different volumes. It's in a slipcase.
Yeah. I'm super curious about that. I'd be interested in checking. Maybe I should get the best of and save seeing the complete Wits End until you and I have a chance to actually get together one of these days. But I do want to see that work because these are seminal artists, of course, and it's an interesting thing. I'm just curious how long it is because I'm wondering how long the run of Wits End really was and how much material there is, but it seems like there's quite a lot. So after that, I'm at First Second. Is that where you go?
Yeah, that's where I go.
Great.
320.
Great. Yep. 320. And the aforementioned Adventure Zone starts us off there.
Yes, the Adventure Zone Volume 1, Here There Be Gerblins. Now, do you know what the Adventure Zone is?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, I think I've started to listen to 1 or 2 episodes, but it's not my kind of podcast, but okay, well, I don't know if my son listens to it. I think he does, but I know my daughter is gaga over the Adventure Zone. And my wife, I think, has heard almost all the episodes of the podcast, The Adventure Zone. And so basically what you have here is the McElroy family. It's a father and sons, and I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 sons. I think maybe 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Maybe our listeners know that I'm wrong there. You can correct me by writing us at comicsalternative.com. Yeah. And say, Derek, you don't know what you're talking about. Shut up when you talk about The Adventure Zone. But no, basically what it is, it's a podcast that, or at least at the beginning, I don't know if it evolved over time. And again, our listeners who are much more familiar with this can tell us. They would sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And so it's a podcast about their adventures playing these role-playing games amongst themselves. And so there's a lot of commentary, there's a lot of humor. And I know they have a large and dedicated, even fanatical at times, audience. And so I know that the main writer for this book is Clint McElroy. He's the father. And then Carrie Peach is the artist and I guess adapter or the co-author. My guess is what Peach has done is kind of adapt what they do with the podcast into the Adventure Zone.
I see.
This is curious because I guess about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, I got an early review copy from First Second of the Adventure Zone. And so what I did, since my wife and daughter love it so much, I took a picture of the cover and then texted it to them. I said, guess what I got? And I even contacted First Second about a possible interview with McElroy and Peach. Now, I don't know if this will come about, but it's something that I know that a lot of people really enjoy the Adventure Zone. A very successful podcast, and it has kind of spun out in a way that the McElroys have started to do other things because of the success of the Adventure Zone. But this, coming back to the Solicit, is a, I guess, graphic novel from First Second adaptation of the podcast phenomena, the Adventure Zone.
Yeah, yeah. When I read this Solicit text, I had no prior knowledge of the Adventure Zone. As we've already said in this episode, not a D&D guy. What is fascinating to me about this is that it comes from a podcast, and a podcast where there's a specific and very unique kind of setup that spins out into something interesting, it sounds like, with their family. And so the very kind of DIY nature of podcasts and the huge variety of podcasts out there, from somebody in their basement ranting by themselves to the super high quality kind of podcast that we have here on the Comics Alternative, I think lends itself to some really interesting stories that develop from, say, a family, playing games together and telling that story. So that's kind of interesting to me. So yeah, I'm curious about this Adventure Zone, man.
And this is the second instance on this episode of a graphic novel or a comic in some form or another that is based off of a podcast or by podcasters.
That's true. And actually, we skipped past an Image, The Thrilling Adventure Hour, which also came out of a podcast. So,
yeah, Acker and Blacker. But I didn't mention that because I'm not a fan of Blacker and Acker.
That's right. Yeah, but there we go. So it's becoming a big thing. Yep.
Maybe we're next.
Hey, this is the second mention of that now too. So we better start cooking up our pitch. Yes. Paul and Derek and Paul talk comics.
What else on the First Second page did you want to point out?
Right underneath is Dam Keeper Volume 2. Gwen and I reviewed the first volume of this book by Robert Kondo and Dice Tsutsumi. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book, and has been nominated for an Eisner. And I think both Gwen and I felt like we could see the potential, but we just really wanted to see where it was going, because it really kind of left just as the momentum was picking up in the story. So Volume 2 is where that will happen, obviously. And Scott Westerfield's Spill Zone, second volume, also is happening. And that is Spill Zone Volume 2, The Broken Vow. As I said, Scott Westerfeld and Alex Puvelend is the artist. And I also read the first volume of that. So things that are continuing that First Second is putting out.
We always put out good stuff.
Always. And in fact, a beautiful looking picture book called Pop by Jason Carter Eaton and art by Matt Rockefeller. Don't know anything about it except it's a picture book and the cover has a kid popping balloons and it just looks really good.
Paul, we mentioned at the beginning of the show, I wonder if this episode will go long. I'm looking at the clock now, and we're at about 2 hours. But, I think our listeners by this point have come to expect extra long episodes when we do previews.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Hey, folks, I'm not trying to invite criticism, but if you have feedback for us, come on, Paul, speed it along. Stop it with your tangents. I will be glad to receive them. But I enjoy this chatter.
Oh, I do too. And okay, this is maybe more an aside than anything. I know that there are some people who are podcasters who feel that there's a particular length that's ideal for a podcast episode. And I've heard 20 minutes. I've heard 30 minutes. I think that is a misnomer. I think it's a misunderstanding of what podcasting is all about. And in fact, statistics have shown that some of the most popular podcasts are those with episodes that go for 2 or more hours. Now, I'm not saying that that's an excuse for us to make our previews episodes even longer. But the nature of a podcast as a medium is that you can listen to it on demand. And so you don't have to listen to an episode over a 20 or 25 minute period on your way to work or on your way back, right? And I think that's what people take as kind of some kind of rough guideline for what they may think mistakenly as an ideal length of a podcast.
Sure.
But for me, when it comes to podcasts, you just stop it and start it whenever.
Right. Yeah, well, I'd be really curious if listeners out there who do ingest the whole previews episodes, these long 2 or 3 hour discussions that Derek has with me or Gene or Gwen, what feedback you have for us about it. And also, do you use these episodes when you pre-order comics, whether it's through DCBS, our sponsor, or elsewhere? I'm curious. So if you're listening now and you've gotten 2 hours into this conversation and you're willing, shoot us a message through our many means that you hear all the time. Let us know whether because I'm just curious whether folks, because I've done this before, I've actually listened to the previous episodes and filled out my order forms. And so I'm curious if that's something that people do. It's because it's something that I've done. So
that's good. Yeah. And it would be good to get feedback from listeners about what they think of or how they may even use our previews episodes that come out once a month. Now, I will tell you that according to our download numbers, almost on a regular basis, consistently, the preview shows get more downloads than other episodes. Noticeably more.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But since we're a little over 2 hours now, maybe we should get back to our regularly scheduled programming.
We can speed along the rest. Yeah. I can be efficient.
Now on page 321, which comes right after the first second section.
That's my next one.
Yes, this is under Gallery 13, which is an imprint from Simon & Schuster. And this is Bad Girls, written by Alex DeCampi with art by Victor Santos. So two really powerhouse creators.
Yes.
This seems interesting. It says, in the heart-pounding, starkly colored, and visually stunning graphic novel, or in this graphic novel, 3 women have 12 hours to get out of Cuba with $6 million on the night of New Year's Eve, 1958. So that's, I guess, the premise or the setup of Bad Girls.
Yeah. This is my jam. Alex DeCampi is my jam. Victor Santos is my jam. The characters are, as it says in the very next line, gangsters Maul, Carol, jazz singer Taffy, and Mambo Queen Anna all have their reasons for needing to escape from the El Eden Casino in Havana. And if you look at that cover art, it's got that sort of like very striking, iconic Victor Santos kind of design stuff. I'm so excited for this. This looks really good.
Yeah, and Gallery 13 does some incredible stuff. And we've talked about several Gallery 13 titles in the past. I know we've talked about some of their stuff on the Eurocomic show. And in fact, kind of a heads up, Gene and I are going to be soon interviewing Michael Kupperman because he has a new book coming out later this month from Gallery 13, All the Answers.
Awesome.
Yes, which
good.
is about the experiences with his father.
Yeah.
So Gallery 13 puts out some really good stuff, and I'm always appreciative of them getting in touch with us when they have new material coming out.
Yeah, appreciate that. And it looks like stuff that looks really good in a bookstore shelf. Mm-hmm. And that's great because I think you're going to get creators like Alex DeCampi and Victor Santos, into your Barnes and Nobles or wherever books are still sold. And I like that. I like that kind of appeal, that crossover appeal.
Where do you go next?
I'm at 329 at Graphics.
Me too. And I guess we're going to focus on the same thing.
Yeah. It's another spotlight, which is Karen Goodsnook. Is that how you say it?
I think so. Yeah, Kristen Gersten.
Kristen.
Yeah.
Of course,
Goodsnook.
creator of Hench Girl, which is a really fun series, is now doing what must be a series through Graphics called Making Friends. She, Hench Girl has a really fun, really kind of loose and playful style. Mm-hmm. And so that being applied to what looks like, sixth graders and making friends and all that kind of stuff. This is a proliferation of work along these lines lately. But all of it manages to be unique and manages to sing in the particular, voice of the creator. And so I'm excited to see Gutsnick's work show up this place.
Yep. And I'm hoping that you guys will discuss this on a future Young Reader show.
Yeah, we're definitely filling up our calendar during this previews episode with Young Reader topics, but that's good. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
Do you have anything else in the graphics section?
Oh, just that. And I think this is new, but there's a Smiley's Dream Book picture book, which is, of course, Smiley's known from Bone. Have you seen this before? It's right underneath the
I know Bone,
Friends.
Of course, but I don't know this book,
Sure.
Smiley's Dream Book.
Yeah. I think this is new, which is Jeff Smith himself working on the Bone character Smiley in a picture book. And my daughter just read all of Bone like a month ago, and so in like a day. So because it's just so good, it's so absorbing, and so this will be kind of fun to see these characters again. I think that's it. That's all I had from Graphics. I go to 338 next.
Yes. I go before that to page 330, and this is under the Harper Collins publisher section, and this is Action Presidents Volume 3, Theodore Roosevelt. And of course, this is by Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy. Now, have you read any of the Action President stories?
No, although this team has, of course, done lots of good comics history stuff and all that. So I think flipped through the first one. What was the first one about? Was
Washington.
it a general overview or Washington?
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah. Now, I read, I think, the first digital issue of Action Presidents George Washington, but I didn't go on to continue reading. So I don't even know what the second volume was, what president they focused on there. Do you?
No, I don't.
But now we get the third one, and I'm not even sure if they're doing this first through digital and then collecting them in book form. Again, I've kind of lost track of this.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But I just did that surreptitious Googling that we were talking about earlier. So Action Presidents 2 is Abraham Lincoln. No surprise.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, we're getting the Rushmore here.
Yeah. So, but it's a great creative team, worth checking out.
Yep, absolutely.
And then you say you go to 338 after that?
I do, and 338 features this following title, which I'm getting to. Oh, Jules Pfeiffer,
yes.
The Ghost Script. Yeah, and so, I enjoyed Kill My Mother, and, And
then Cousin Joseph.
That's a sentence you should take in context. I enjoyed, Jules Pfeiffer. I mean, been around forever and been good forever. So The Ghost Script is, the tour de force of his illustrious career. Wow. In this epic finale that dares to try, things that film noir could only dream of, says Chris Ware about this. So in Ghost Script, it's, Blacklist Hollywood 1953, right? Witch hunts of, communist, Hollywood people. And in this context, this, ongoing story of, from Kill My Mother. So this is the last of them. And so. Yeah.
So this is, I guess, the third in the trilogy. So we had Kill My Mother, Cousin Joseph, and now we have The Ghost Script.
Yeah. So, I don't remember Kill My Mother feeling like it was leaving on an unfinished note. I haven't read Cousin Joseph yet. So,
okay. It's been a while since I read either Kill My Mother or Cousin Joseph, but they are connected, but in such a way that I think each can stand on its own. And so my guess is we'll get the same kind of feel with the Ghost script.
Gotcha. Yeah. I feel like you've chimed in before on Jules Feiffer. I don't remember, though. Are you a fan?
Oh, yeah. I love
Okay.
his work. And one of the things that strikes me about his most recent stuff here that's coming out through Liverite, Kill My Mother, Cousin Joseph, and now we have the Ghost script, is that, I mean, he had done graphic novels before, like Tantrum, but Tantrum, it's kind of a different kind of graphic novel. I think that Kill My Mother and Cousin Joseph are more elaborate long-form stories, and that's not really what he's known for. He's known, obviously for his Village Voice strips is where he's become most famous. But of course, he's also been a screenwriter. And in fact, Jules Feiffer is the only Academy Award winning creator who's been on the Comics Alternative, because Andy and I were lucky enough to interview him around the time of Kill My Mother.
Is that right? I forgot that.
Yeah, and that was a joy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was intimidating because, of course, he's the great Jules Feiffer.
Sure.
But yeah, he turned out to be a load of fun to speak with. Yeah, go back and listen to that interview.
I got to. Man, how did I miss that? I've seen him interviewed on TV, a few times, but dude, on the Comics Alternative. That's great.
Yeah, we get good people every now and again.
Oh, we sure do. All the time, actually. We're speaking as a listener now, we're totally spoiled by all the good stuff. Yeah.
And then after that, we have a rather extensive Line Forge section. Now, there are only, I think maybe just one thing that I wanted to mention, maybe two. But there's a lot of good stuff here in Line Forge. And the thing that, I know I've mentioned this on the show before, but the thing that is so impressive about Lion Forge is they seem to have come out of nowhere. I mean, they're like a mushroom, right?
Ooh.
Or a field of mushrooms. A couple of years ago, where were they? What were they doing? And then now, every single month, the Lion Forge section and its various imprints just filled with material.
Yeah. Yeah, I sighed when you said Line Forge because I'm time conscious now since our previous little discussion about that. And I'm like, oh man, I marked all of these because they all look so good. But absolutely, and so they magnetized with Magnetic. They attracted Magnetic to itself, and Magnetic has been doing these really great books whose production quality is fantastic, right? A lot of European stuff, I think. And and so that is part of it. And then their Cub Scout stuff, their Roar imprint, not to mention the superhero little line that they have.
Which I know you've been reading.
I have been, yeah. So it's just so much good stuff. They did sort of roar out of nowhere. And man, it's hard to pick because I would recommend so many things, or I'm interested and curious about so many things in this section.
Well, the one that I was going to highlight, and I say, there are other things that are worth highlighting as well, but the one that really struck my attention is the first one on page 340, and this is Sea of Love.
Yeah.
Written by Wilfred Lupano with art by Gregory Pancioni. And we have a page of sample art on the facing page 341, and it just looks fascinating. And I mean, this does strike me as kind of typical art style of, let's say, a European album.
Yep.
Which is one of the things, as you mentioned, we tend to get through Line Forge and, specifically their Magnetic collection.
Yeah. Yeah, it does look gorgeous. I think it's really interesting that the cover art of this is much more flat and cartoonish, while the interior has this painted, layered art. It's usually the reverse.
Yeah, more moody, more lush.
That's right. But yeah, it absolutely looks gorgeous. Sea of Love looks really good. And I'd say the same, actually, even though it's quite a contrast stylistically about the next one on the next page, which is Heracles, book 1. Which is written by Edward Core. Art and cover by Edward Core as well, and is very idiosyncratic kind of comics art style retelling of the Hercules story. So that looks kind of cool too. Thick with a dusty orange, seems like, in this book from the cover to the interior.
Yeah,
so kind of interested in this interpretation of the story of course, demigod Heracles is this title. And then I guess to discipline myself, I'll limit myself to just one more in this package here, which is The Dream of the Butterfly, Part 2, which I don't know if you talked about Part 1.
This is on page 348.
Yes, thank you. 348, and this is in the Clubhouse imprint. But it's written by Richard Marzano, who has a few different European titles, though they're not sort of coming to my head right now, that he's written, and he tends to collaborate with really great artists. And Luo Yin, who is the artist, I can only imagine of Asian descent, of The Dream of the Butterfly. And I saw this the first volume, Part 1. I didn't read it. I just thumbed through it because the art was so eye-catching that I just wanted to kind of, look at it when I first got it digitally. And so I'm really interested to see it continue and probably want to actually read it now for, this is a Tutu is the, blown from her home by a great blizzard and, finds herself in a village of talking animals. It really is an opportunity for an artist to show off, art chops, but Marzano has, pretty good pedigree as a writer as well. So, Dream of the Butterfly.
I don't remember when the first one was solicited, but I'm sure I may have noticed it.
I think it was maybe last year or even half a year, not too long ago. Yeah.
So anything else in Line Forge? I know that there's so many good titles.
Yeah, no, in fact, I'm going to hold back until Silver Sprocket at 378. So if you have anything before that, we can do that.
Yeah, I did want to mention on 360, this is in the Oni section, The Long Con #1. This is written by Dylan McConis and Ben Coleman with art by, Ia Denich?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
I guess. Ia.
Right.
And I don't know. One of the things that caught my attention was the title, because it's a play on a con game convention.
Yeah.
And the thing that I noticed about that, or caught my attention about that, is that this is not new. I mean, we've seen a number of titles that do the same thing. I remember that not too long ago, and I can't remember the title, but Jimmy Palmiotti had something kind of like this. Maybe, I mean, not the same premise, but it was a take on the convention and the con game. And so part of me kind of rolled my eyes a little bit when I saw this title. But the premise seems a little different, seems interesting. It says, 5 years ago, a cataclysmic event obliterated everything within a 50-mile radius of the Los Spinoza Convention Center, including the attendees of LongCon, the world's biggest and longest comics convention. But unknown to the outside world, the con-goers not only survived, they kept the convention going. Then when proof of their survival surfaces, reporter Victor Lai, interesting name,
my cousin,
yes, is sent to investigate. After all, he was covering the con that fateful day and escaped mere minutes before everything went kablooey, abandoning his nerdy pal Dez in the process. So clearly he's the perfect person for the job, and he won't get trapped inside some kind of idiot. Or like some kind of idiot, right? So, I mean, it is an interesting premise. I'm not exactly sure where it's going. I don't know if I'll read this first issue, but I mention it because it did catch my attention. Yeah,
it's not yet to this point, but it's getting to the point where stories that are based in or related to cons are becoming a kind of micro genre.
Yeah.
But if you've attended a con, or even if you haven't just seen them on TV, it is such a carnival atmosphere, that how could you not want to, after you attend a con, if you're a storyteller, how would you not want to tell a story of this sort of like throng of human activity that goes on at a con? People cosplaying, big fans of this, big fans of that, reporters and journalists like Victor Lai, who, I feel, suspiciously like this is supposed to be my cousin. It's just such a fascinating human social phenomenon, the convention, that to then take it and imagine it like, what if we stayed here? What if we didn't all die from con crud and go home in 3 days and instead just kind of lived in this world for a while? So yeah, that's a super interesting premise to me. Sounds cool. Yeah.
So you say you go next to the Silver Sprocket section, which is on page 378.
Yeah. Let's. Did you flag those? I'm looking at Dayglow A-hole number 2, and actually most especially girls, because that's the new one.
Yeah. Now I had looked at Dayglow A-hole number 2, but I mentioned number 1 on a previous previews episode, so I wasn't going to mention this. I did see girls, but I didn't highlight that as something to mention. So why don't you describe why you're highlighting this?
Entirely judging this book by its cover. It's by Jen Woodall.
Don't you know you're not supposed to do that?
That's right. That's how the saying goes, isn't it? But no, I don't know if this is I imagine it's not a resolicit, but just a cool looking cover. I mean, cool art. It says Woodall's collected illustrations of fierce femmes are inspiring and vital. The bold, colorful ways in which Woodall explores domestic violence, street harassment, and gender expression are wonderful, if at times playful. I'm sorry. That's terrible. If at times painful, the art and social commentary in Jen Woodall's Girls make it an absolute must-have. That's a quote from Rogue's Portal magazine. But yeah, I mean, it looks like a illustration collection, but if the cover is any indication of the sort of kind and quality of illustration, it looks really, really cool. Really, really, interesting. So.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of the cover art. That's what caught my attention. Yeah. But the main reason I didn't mark this to solicit is the way that they're describing this is a collection of illustrations, which wouldn't necessarily make it a comic.
Sure.
I mean, depending on your definition of comic. So that's why I didn't bring it up. But you're right. I mean, the art does look quite impressive. Actually, on that page, it's what's above Silver Sprocket that I was going to mention, what caught my attention, and this is from Secret Acres. I really like, I mean, this is a very small publisher, and they don't do a lot of stuff, but I do like what they come out with. And this is a title, Little Stranger, by Eddie Fake. Is it Edie? E-D-I-E.
Looks like Edie. I would guess Edie.
Yeah, Edie Fake. And Edie Fake is a winner of an Ignatz Award, a previous work called Gaylord Phoenix. Now, I'm not familiar with Gaylord Phoenix, and I looked it up. But the fact that Gaylord Phoenix won an Ignatz Award, and the fact that this is a Secret Acres book, I definitely want to check it out. It says, have you ever gotten turned on while stuffing a turkey? I haven't, but you know.
No.
Yeah. Get a little stranger this spring with Edie Fake. What's silly, scary, and sexy? Edie Fake's comics forged an entire aesthetic of art and queer culture. Since his Ignatz Award-winning Gaylord Phoenix, Fake's comics have not only appeared in underground anthologies and zines. At last, these rare comics can all be found under the cover of Little Stranger. You'll never look at a turkey the same way again. So apparently this is a collection of his various anthologized works. And the whole thing about getting turned on stuffing a turkey, that definitely caught my attention.
Yeah. I managed to miss it somehow, but that does look interesting.
You were so enthralled with girls.
Actually, I think what caught my eye was the other thing on this page, which is Reconstruction, which is another, I think, book meant to support contributors from various places. I just listened to your recent interview with Hazel Newlevant.
Newlevant, yeah.
Is that how you say their name? But they worked on Puerto Rico Strong, which was a similar, I think, attention or fundraising or whatever kind of effort for Puerto Rico. In light of, of course, its circumstances right now. But Reconstruction is an anthology with your Gail Simones and Greg Pak and Reginald Hudland and Bill Sienkiewicz and all kinds of folks. An anthology to support Reconstruction. So that looks really interesting. That's from Somos Arte, which I'm not familiar with them. I wonder if it's directly related to this project in particular. But,
and also on that facing page, you have a full page spread advertising Reconstruction.
Wow. This is where using the app made me totally miss that because even though I'm looking at 2-page spreads, I have to zoom in to read this stuff. So I totally missed that. On the facing page is the giant ad. Yeah.
I don't have anything until we get to Titan on page 392.
I was just going to stop by that 382. Is that 382? No, what? That's the wrong page. Oh, no, right before 380. 380 is a brief pause for this Starburns Industries Press. Starburns Industry is For fans of Dan Harmon's show Community, they'll recognize the character Starburns as a recurring side character on that show. My wife and I enjoyed that show a lot, and Dan Harmon's kind of a cool entertainment presence, including Rick and Morty, which is probably how he's known now, but I know him from Community and stuff before that. But basically, they're doing some comics. So they have a title called Gregory Graves, it's sort of interview with a supervillain, and then another one called Halicious, and it looks like they're going to be coming out with a variety of different stuff to come. So just a mention that they're arriving on the scene.
Yeah, I saw this, but I didn't really give it much thought because I've never seen Community, so... And even though I have seen Rick and Morty episodes, I'm not a big Rick and Morty fan.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally an aside, but Dan Harmon has a funny sense of humor and is also one of these folks who sort of his full personality is on display in public. He has a podcast as well. I can't remember what the title of it is. Recently got called out for some past sort of within the Me Too movement, called out for some past behavior for which publicly apologized, and I appreciated that the way that he sort of dealt with that in public was more honest than others, I could say. But anyway, the Starburns character in Community is a hilarious character who has sideburns that grow into a star, which is why he's called Starburns. It's kind of a funny character. So anyway, that'll be something I'm curious about watching.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, I go to 392, and this is again in the Titan section. And this seems like an interesting project. And, earlier I mentioned that Terry Smulderin's name would come up again. This is where it's coming up. He is the writer of this new book, McKay, and Jean-Philippe Bramanti is the artist. And they don't give much description of what this is about, but what information they do give in the Titan section is intriguing. It says, get ready for a dizzying dive into the, quote, McKay dimension, unquote, with this equally true and false tribute to undisputed master of the imagination. McKay is an invented biography, and they put that in quotes, chronicling authentic, though only partially true, stories of the life of the future creator of Little Nemo, Winsor McKay, in which McKay's life is enriched by an imaginary encounter with British mathematician and science fiction writer Charles Hinton, and glimpses of the fourth dimension. So, I mean, that's intriguing. And they do have on that page 3 small, and I want to underscore small, examples of sample art, to the point that I wondered, why the hell even include those? Because who would take a magnifying glass to this? And I know that sometimes in previews, publishers sometimes have smaller versions of sample pages. Not this small. Although the cover, and I'm assuming this is the cover art, is a decent size. So it does give you a sense of what Bramanti's art is like.
Right.
But I'm intrigued by what they're going to be doing with Winsor McKay that is equal parts true and false.
Yes. It is a very tantalizing pitch. Terry Smolderin, of course, will be interesting to read. And Winsor McKay, a subject who you feel like you have to do something that has a bit of fancy in it, I mean, so much imagination. I'm picturing a comics being John Malkovich kind of encounter with the real and not real of this person. So, I do think about the sample art. It does look like really, even though you're right, totally tiny, it also looks pretty. And I don't know. I don't want to say something rude, but I think sometimes Titan books have great looking covers, but then the interior art can be lackluster at times, to my taste. But not so with this. So maybe this is just them taking a chance to show off what is some really good looking interior art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you go after that?
I have a stop at Uncivilized at 406, and that actually does it for me until manga, which I actually don't have any specific manga titles, but just kind of this section in general. Yeah,
I go where you go, I think, with Uncivilized. But before we get there, though, the previous couple of pages on 404, this is in the Tomorrow's Publishing section, is American Comic Book Chronicles, the 1990s. Now, Are you a fan of Tomorrow's American Comic Book Chronicles series?
No, I've read a lot of Tomorrow's stuff, and I am a fan of Tomorrow's. But these, I've heard you talk about them, but I haven't checked them out myself.
I love these books, and they're equal parts substantive, informative, and design-wise really attractive. So I think it's a great balance, and you can say that about most of the things that Tomorrow's comes out with. I mean, it's not just a wall of text that gives you a lot of information, something that you would find maybe more from an academic publisher.
Right.
But it does have that content to a large degree, but at the same time, there is a heavy emphasis on visual design, which you will definitely not find with academic-oriented books. Sadly, and I can tell you from painful experience as an academician. But no, this is a series I've been, for the most part, keeping up with. They've got volumes, I think 2 volumes in the 1950s, I think 2 in the 1960s, or maybe 1 in the 1950s, 2 in the 1960s, 1 in the 1980s, and then 1 in the 1970s. They're going to be, maybe they already have volumes from the 1940s. I can't recall, but they're going to have one from, I guess, the second half of the 1930s. In other words, they're not necessarily doing these volumes in chronological order. Right. And now, but it's been, at least 3 years since we got the last one. And so it's about time. I was really happy to see that we have this new one coming out later this year from the 1990s. And the way that these books are organized is that the sections are chronological in nature. And so what you have, so this will be for the entire decade of the 1990s. So you'll have 10 main sections, 1990, 1991, so on and so forth. And within each year, it begins with, there's the introduction, and then there's a timeline. And what the timeline does at the beginning of each major chapter, which reflects a particular year, is you have a listing of major events within the comics industry for that particular year. But you also have that juxtaposed with other events, both pop culture related and others. So sometimes even political events, like what went on politically in the 1990s. So I'm sure in this volume we'll have, Bill Clinton was elected in November of 1992. So you'll have that information along the timeline. Now, what that does is it gives you a sense of what was going on in comics and how that is contextualized with what was going on in our culture, pop culture and otherwise, at the same time. And I think that that's very useful. And that's just how the chapter starts. But then what follows after the intro and then timeline is a broad, and you have to be broad here because you can't include everything that goes on in comics, overview of what happened that year. With publishers, with titles, with artists, so on and so forth. Very informative, very well done. And the writers of this volume, Jason Sachs and Keith Dallas, have done many of the previous volumes of this American Comic Book Chronicles series. And it's something that if you're not familiar with, I highly recommend that you jump on board. You don't necessarily have to read them in chronological order. And in fact, there's a joy, I think, in not reading them in chronological order. Right. So read the 1980s volume and then go back and read, 1960 through 1965 or 4, and then the second 1965 to 1969 volume. Just really good stuff. I mean, I like what Tomorrow. I'm probably going on and on a little longer than I should about this.
No. Keep going.
But
keep going.
Tomorrow's does a lot of good stuff. To me, it doesn't get any better than American Comic Book Chronicles in terms of both content and design.
Wow. First of all, Derek, that was a fantastic sales pitch. I hope Tomorrow should send you royalties because you've convinced at least one person who previously hadn't read these to do so. I have the Tomorrow's app on my iPad, and that's where I get a lot of my Tomorrow stuff. And I think after this conversation is over, I'm gonna go pick up one of these and try them out. I wish that 90s was out already because I would be super curious about seeing that juxtaposed chronology because the 90s is, I turned 10 in 1990. So the 90s is my first era of, hardcore comics fandom, of my teens. So that'll be super interesting to see. But yeah, I definitely want to go back and look at the, previously released, decades now that you've given such a strong pitch for it. Man, I can't believe I haven't seen this before. So, you've mentioned these before, but I think now I definitely want to check them out.
Yeah, you should. And I'm not being paid by Tomorrow's, by the way.
You're not, although you should, and they should call them royalties, I feel like.
But then we go to that next page, 406, under Uncivilized Books. Tom Kaczynski's publishing arm.
That's right. And this is Clandestinauts by Tim Sievert. The wisdom of a wizard, the faith of a cleric. If this team had them, they'd get home safe. So it gives you a picture. We have some ogres and stuff like that looking like on the cover. And they're trying to acquire the goblet of the Crimson Wizard. There's a dungeoneering team. So yeah, this looks fun. But it looks like a little sort of hapless version of these kinds of fantasy characters on an adventure. At 228 pages, $18. This looks like a fun romp, and I like uncivilized stuff, so I think I'll check this out. Yeah,
I'm definitely getting this. In fact, just recently I ordered this through Uncivilized, and maybe I could get it a little cheaper, getting it through Discount Comic Book Service, our sponsor. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, for years I've been getting books directly through Uncivilized, sometimes when they have specials, but even when they don't, I don't know. I like Uncivilized. I like what they do. I like what Tom Kaczynski does. Not only his own stuff, but what he, the other things that he publishes through Uncivilized. And so I just feel, that's right. It's a way of supporting a really small press by getting material directly through them.
Right. I mean, that brings up that, and we don't have to go into this now in depth, but it is a quandary sometimes. On one hand, I, enjoy the savings that I get at DCBS, our sponsor. But we also like to support local comic shops. And you do that by visiting one, and doing podcasts there and so on. And on the other hand, it's also nice to buy directly from the publisher and to just sort of like very directly give them support, whether it's through a Kickstarter, as you've done so well in your Kickstarter episodes when they come up, or, through the website, as I said, ordering from Fantagraphics directly that I do. So yeah, it becomes a quandary. We're definitely suckers for this stuff wherever it can appear, but then we have to make the decision of how and where to support them. We didn't even bring up digital, so that's, Yep. But that's actually the end of my picks. I sort of thumbed through the manga stuff and had a lot of thoughts about the idea of manga being separate. But apart from that, that's me. That's it for me in previews. Oh, except to mention that Valiant work continues to look really cool. But nothing new to get into there.
Now you mentioned that you had some thoughts about the manga section. In other words, putting at least the vast majority of the manga in one place toward the back.
Yeah.
Do you like that arrangement?
I'm kind of torn. I would be super curious to talk to retailers, especially those retailers that I've talked to who know that some of their, patrons are not necessarily manga fans, but they like to show interesting manga to them, whether it serves them better to have it separate or whether they miss sort of the close contact. And, it's basically the tension, between manga becoming separated and being able to serve its audience, in that kind of unique corner, or the feeling that it's kind of segregated or shunted off to the side. And, I think I can understand it going both ways. And I think this kind of demonstrates that, if it's not mixed in, maybe people miss it. Maybe they skip it because they think I'm not a manga person, but that sort of further creates that separation where, I think, manga's comics. And I wish that so many comics fans didn't write off manga because they thought it wasn't their thing, So I'm mixed. I'm of two minds.
Yeah, I'm glad that you put it that way, because on the one hand, I do think that there's something useful about putting all the manga, or at least most of the manga, in one location. On the other hand, yeah, there is the potential side effect of marginalizing in one way or another, or cordoning off manga as separate from comics. But as you point out, and as Shay and I try to point out all the time, manga is basically comics produced primarily in Japan, and for all practical purposes, it's the same thing.
Right.
But there's a mistake that many comics readers feel that it's different in significant ways when it's not. And I don't want to mention any names, but there are a couple of podcasts. There's one in particular that I was listening to recently. In fact, it was, I don't know, maybe a few months ago, in fact, because it was, I think, a kind of a year-end show. And this particular podcast that I used to listen to all the time, they had several people on, and they were making these broad, generalizing comments about manga and why they didn't read it, completely off base. And in fact, one person even mentioned that the reason he didn't read manga is because, and if I remember correctly, he said this, the backgrounds are not very detailed. And I'm wondering, what the hell manga are you reading? Because to me, I mean, the art in manga is much more detailed. And not only in terms of the background, I think, than when it comes to the art compared to U.S. produced comics, especially. Yeah. So I think there's just a misunderstanding or a misappreciation, really, of manga by many readers.
Yeah. I mean, mangaka have entire staffs of assistants that are there to draw these really carefully rendered backgrounds. So, I mean, Derek, just tell us who it is. We'll call him out. I'll fight him. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I do understand. I mean, I don't blame folks, because I think that there's ways that there's some like self-identifying markers where manga, distinguishes itself, and therefore if other people just like count them out, that's part of the effect of it. But yeah, I think that you've done a great job. Comics Alternative has done a great job of bringing to the attention of readers who, maybe are into the drawn-in quarterly and Fantagraphics stuff and are open to manga, like what's out there. Not only from those publishers, but from, publishers like Fanfare, Ponetmon, or of course Viz Signature, or all that kind of stuff, like really good quality manga. And what's great is that there's stuff that rises to that level of super, super quality that it can't miss if you're a comics fan, that comes from stuff that's originally seinen or shonen or shoujo or whatever, Yeah. And there's a nice little Mangapedia page that is a little informative about what each of those are, that I kind of like here in the previews at the beginning of the manga section. But yeah, I mean, I just think, I just hope that quarantining them to the back isn't going to further, take them out of the sort of attention of non-manga comics, American comics readers.
Right. Yeah. And, I have to admit that over the past few months, I have been probably overdoing it with my manga reading, and not just preparing for the monthly manga show, but doing more manga reading at the expense of what people may call regular, or let's say Western comics, which is unfortunate. Although on the other hand, I'm having a ball catching up with a lot of manga titles. And by the way, I should mention that I think by the time this episode comes out soon, very soon, Shay and I are going to be releasing our, if you can believe it, April manga episode. We're late in getting that out. We apologize. We do plan on getting the April show out soon, and then also late in the month, our May show. But there were just some complications in getting the April show completed in time. But it'll come out soon.
Derek, I don't know if anybody else gets to say this on the show, so, man, you work so hard. I feel like it's very kind of you to apologize, but, there's the Comics Alternative is giving so much free, good quality, high quality free stuff that, man, folks shouldn't complain. But I'm really hyped to hear the next installment of the manga show. I'm always a happy listener of that.
Well, good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Now, in the manga section, you say you didn't have any title in particular you wanted to point out, right?
No, nothing specific.
Okay, there are only two things this month that caught my interest, so it won't take long to highlight them. And one, I don't want to go into too much detail about it because this is the second volume, but this is in the Viz section. It's on page 440. And it is Inio Asano's Dead Demons DDDDD Destruction, Volume 2. Now, I wanted to mention that first and foremost because I love that title and I like to say it. Dead Demons DDDDD Destruction. It's wild. I just got through DCB Service, our sponsor, the first volume of this series. And I haven't had the chance to read it yet. I am a big Inio Asano fan. I think I've read everything that has been translated into English that we have. We've discussed him a number of times on the manga show, and this, I think, the first volume will be one of the texts that Shay and I discuss for the May show, which will come out late this month. That's what I'm hoping. Cool. But the second volume is being solicited in this month's catalog, so that's good.
Right.
The only other thing that I have to mention in the manga section, and I think this is in Kodansha. This is on page 454. And Kodansha does a lot of good stuff as well. We talk about a lot of Kodansha titles. This seems interesting. This is Grand Blue Dreaming, Volume 1. By Kenji Inoue and Kimitaki Yoshiaka. I always feel bad in mispronouncing names, especially with manga creators. But the solicit seems interesting. It says, the hit comedy manga, which got my attention. It's like it's a hit, so maybe I should pay attention to it. The hit comedy manga comes to print by popular demand. Swimsuits, ramen, dumb jokes, beer, uncomfortable nudity. A boy heads off to college in a seaside town and stumbles into the Grand Blue Dive Shop, a place full of beautiful female divers, noodle-obsessed jocks, and various other lovable bastards. A tale of coming of age surrounded by beer, bums, and the Grand Blue. That's a great solicit.
Sounds interesting.
It whets my appetite, and I don't know what the hell it's about.
Very effective. Sometimes the plot or the premise is not the point anyway, right? It's really the vibe you want to get. Yeah. No, I'm glad you pointed those out because, I, in the thicket, and, this is where I'm on the side of the ledger that I was just pointing fingers at just now. But yeah, sometimes I flip through the stuff and it's hard to distinguish what, the wheat from the dross. And so it's cool to hear about what's interesting. Taniguchi jumps out at me, but that's a re-solicit, and there's always a ton of Attack on Titan. But I think that's part of my maturing understanding of manga is just like recognizing, what's new, what's good, what's interesting. So I like dwelling in this section with you.
Well, we've dwelled quite a long time in this month's previews catalog. It's not quite 3 hours, but it's pushing it.
Pretty close.
Yes. But again, I have no problem with these long episodes. I mean, the closest thing I have to a quote-unquote problem is that it is evening and I haven't eaten dinner yet. So that's what I'll be doing soon after we get off of Skype. But it's been fun talking with you about the May Previews catalog.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for listeners for bearing with us through this long chat. But do give us feedback, as I mentioned earlier. We do try to make this show work for y'all. So let us know what you think.
That's right. And, you can find everything that Paul and I just highlighted over this almost 3-hour episode at great discounts at the website of our sponsor, which is Discount Comic Book Service. Remember, go to dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs and at unbelievable discounts. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about this month's preview show. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phones and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
If your preferred means of communication is email, we are at 2guys@comicsalternative.com or individually Derek@comicsalternative.com and I'm Paul at comicsalternative.com.
And you can find us all over social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com.
So much good coverage. So much good comics.
Yes. And, as Paul was emphasizing a while ago, we would like to hear from you about our preview shows in particular. I mean, what kind of uses you may put those to. If you think that they're too long, if you find them very useful in going through the catalog every month on your own, let us hear from you. We'd like to get some kind of feedback on that.
Yeah, and previous episodes have also spawned some good general conversation about the industry, of the market, manga and being separate, all that stuff. So weigh in, let us know, and we love to talk about your thoughts on the mailbag.
That's right. And Paul and I will be back next week with a regular review show, so look forward to that. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Paul. See you later.
Hey, what happened?